Metropolitan Area Transit Authority Board of Directors and a director from the District of Columbia. This hearing is convened by the board to elicit the comments of the public on the proposed relocation of bus facilities and parking changes at the Takoma Metro Rail Station. Notice of this hearing was made by publication in the Washington Post newspaper, distributed to Councilmember Fenty's office and the ANCs, and placed in the Takoma Park Branch Library in the district, as well as Takoma Park, Maryland Library. In addition, notices were delivered to property owners, stores, and churches in the immediate vicinity of the Takoma Metro Rail Station. Briefly, I will cover the procedure that we will follow during the hearing. First, we will hear a staff presentation on the proposed project. Second, we will hear from those persons who registered in advance to speak at this public hearing. And in this reading, we have 58. Public officials will be heard first and will be allowed 5 minutes. Then those who registered in advance will be heard in order of registration and allowed 3 minutes each. Third, we will hear from anyone present who indicates a desire to be heard and will be allowed 3 minutes each. Please see Ms. Chambliss outside of the room if you wish to speak tonight. Further testimony may be submitted in writing until 5 p.m. Wednesday, October 25th, 2006, to Ms. Deborah Johnson, Secretary, WMATA Board of Directors, 600 5th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20001. Alternatively, statements may be faxed to 202-962-1133 or emailed to public-hearing-testimony@wmata.com. That's public-hearing-testimony@WMATA.com. Following a review of all testimony received for the public hearing record, WMATA staff will prepare a report on the public hearing for the WMATA Board of Directors. Changes to the plan presented here tonight may be proposed in response to testimony received and subsequent staff analysis. The staff report will then be circulated for public review for a period of 2 weeks. If you wish to receive a copy of the staff report, please leave your name and address with Ms. Chambliss. At the completion of the public review period, the WMATA Board of Directors will consider the public hearing record, the staff report, and public comments, and act on the proposed relocation of bus facilities and parking changes at the Takoma Metro Rail Station. Please note that the use of profanity will not be tolerated during this public meeting. In addition, smoking is only permitted outside of the building, and if you have not done so already, please silence all cell phones. A verbatim transcript will be made of this hearing, and a copy of the transcript, when available, will be on the WMATA website at metroopendoors.com. It may also be reviewed at the Metro headquarters or purchased from Beta Court Reporting, whose telephone number is 202-464-2400. I now call on Ms. Elisa Hill from WMATA for the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Elisa Hill, the project manager for the Takoma Joint Development Project for the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. On April 20th, 2000, WMATA selected Eakin, Young & Tubb Associates, Inc. to develop its 6.8-acre property at the Takoma station. At the request of the District of Columbia and the City of Takoma Park, Maryland, the project was put on hold until 2003 to allow completion of the district's small area planning process and for the Takoma station area and a transportation study sponsored by both the District of Columbia and the City of Takoma Park. A sales agreement was executed with EYA on June 20th, 2005. EYA proposes a residential townhome project. WMATA facilities would be enhanced and reconfigured. A reduction in WMATA parking is proposed, but an alternative plan preserving current parking levels is also being presented for comment. I will now call on the EYA team to make a brief presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jack Lester. I'm a project manager with EYA and responsible for this project at Takoma Park. I'm going to go through a very, very brief presentation of the site. I know many of you have seen this before, and much of it was included in the announcement of the public hearing. I'll talk a little bit about how the plan was developed. We have a site showing the existing conditions, two site plans we prepared for this evening, the transit enhancements plan, and just a little bit on the architecture and the village green. The plan was developed using a number of documents here listed. Primarily, though, it was based on the principles of the Central District Plan. That and extensive discussions and work with the operating folks at WMATA to get the bus facilities and the parking program to their liking. The common planning themes were, number one, enhancement of the metro facilities and utilization, enhancement of pedestrian circulation and safety, revitalization of commercial areas, enhancement of neighborhood amenities and parks, preserving the existing character of the neighborhood, development in scale and character to the existing development, and development of townhomes to bridge the gap between apartments and single-family homes in the community. This is an aerial showing the existing conditions. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the site. This is the first conceptual site plan that I want to show. This plan shows, with regard to the metro facilities, it shows a surface parking lot off to the left that has 75 surface parking spaces. The bus area is showing 10 bus bays and 2 layover bays in the median strip that runs right through the bus circulating area. This plan and the structured parking plan are nearly identical as to the configurations of the residential component and to the village green component. The primary difference here is that of the structured parking. The parking, again, over to the left is a parking deck, 2 levels, ground level, and 1 level above that. That is the primary difference between these two plans. And I've put together just a quick matrix to highlight some of those differences. In the existing condition, there are 9 bus bays, 0 layover, a total of 150 parking spaces, kiss and ride, 0 handicap spaces of 6, taxi of 3 and 1 zip car, bike lockers of 30, and bike racks of 38, as compared to the surface plan, which in the bus area is 75 surface spaces, 29 on-street public spaces for a total of 104, 7 kiss and ride, 7 handicap spaces, 3 taxi spaces, 1 flex or zip car space, and 40 lockers and 50 racks. On the structured plan, similarly, 10 bus bays, 2 layover bays. The parking deck contains 128 spaces. The on-street spaces created by the development are an additional 29 for a total of 157. And again, the 7 kiss and ride, 7 handicap, 3 taxi, one zip, and the 40 and 50 bike racks and lockers. The enhancements to the station and to the area include safe access, increased safe access for pedestrians, bicyclists, and buses. This plan incorporates the Metropolitan Branch Bicycle Trail. Through streets that connect through to existing streets, the integral parking lot or deck in the alternative, on-street parking, as I mentioned, 29 spaces, views and access corridors to the metro facility, the new taxi stand under the overpass where folks prefer to stop, improvements under the tracks, including lighting and painting, enhanced signage, bus bays and layover bays to increase the number from 9 to 12, signalization of the metro station bus entrance so that buses, when they are pulling out, they would have a signal to stop traffic, bus access on Carroll and Eastern, kiss and ride spaces on Carroll and Cedar, an increase to bike lockers and bike racks, as I mentioned, adequate lighting adjacent to the bike racks. We've proposed an information kiosk outside the metro station, enhanced crosswalks for pedestrian and bike safety, a new space for a flex car, the branch trail, as I mentioned, and increase of handicap space. This is just a perspective of some of the quality of the architecture that we've proposed for the site. It borrows from the surrounding architecture of your community. This is the home on the corner of Eastern and Cedar is highlighted here. This is the streetscape as you'd see it on Eastern Avenue. And again, this is just perspectives. These are the live-work units that are proposed on one of the streets created, architecture more appropriate to a DC style. The ground floor of these would be retail, and the upper floors would be residential. Here's a view, a larger view of the Village Green that you saw earlier in the site plan. We propose to provide a mix of passive and active areas within the Village Green. And here's just a simple perspective of that. If you were standing at the coffee shop, looking across, seeing the kiosk. In summary, we believe the concept achieves the following planning and community objectives. It's substantially in accord with the neighborhood planning documents. It enhances the metro facilities. It creates a usable Village Green. It improves pedestrian circulation and safety. It continues the revitalization of the commercial areas, and we propose a high quality of housing in scale and in character to the surrounding community. Also, this development will have negligible impacts on traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll now call our first witness, Phil Alperson, representing Congressman Chris Van Hollen. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much. I'm here representing Congressman Van Hollen. This is his statement. I wish to thank the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, WMATA, for holding this hearing and for giving the residents of both Maryland and the District of Columbia the opportunity to air their views and on proposed development of WMATA property at the Takoma Metro Station. Transit-oriented development is in everyone's best interest when it encourages public use of transit alternatives and succeeds in taking cars off the road. It reduces traffic congestion and pollution and improves the quality of life for all. It is vital that any development plan at the Takoma Metro site, or at any metro property for that matter, conform to WMATA's mission to provide and maintain effective transit services. This means that while WMATA accommodates the needs of new residents and businesses located on the development site, WMATA must be equally mindful of the needs of the transit-riding public and of the neighborhoods surrounding the metro station. As you know, I have been concerned for some time that the existence of an imaginary line separating Maryland from the District of Columbia precluded residents of the city of Takoma Park, Maryland, from having sufficient input earlier in the process of the formation of development plans. In fact, an early draft of the development plan restricted the movement of commuter buses around the station and would have resulted in a direct increase in traffic, congestion, and pollution in neighborhoods, mainly in Maryland, surrounding the station. This issue was addressed following a meeting between WMATA officials and community leaders from Takoma Park on August 26, 2005. However, this design flow would never have been made had the city of Takoma Park been integrated into the planning process. I appreciate the flexibility demonstrated by WMATA and its development partner to modify the design plans and correct this problem. It is my fervent hope that the development plans as they stand today will put the needs of the commuting public first, as is WMATA's mission. This will require that sufficient entrances, exits, and layover bays are available to allow buses to move freely. Safe access for pedestrians, cyclists, and individuals with disabilities must be assured. Taxi and kiss-and-ride stands should not inhibit vehicular traffic. Requisite green space is an essential amenity that must continue to be a part of the area infrastructure. I am hopeful that WMATA and the developer will use information from today's hearing and other community forums to design a project that can address the concerns of the commuting public and residents of neighborhoods surrounding the Takoma Metro Station. I am well aware that WMATA intends to apply lessons learned from its experience in the development of the Takoma Metro to future transit-oriented developments at other metro sites throughout the system. If WMATA has learned anything from the arduous process of planning a development project at the Takoma Metro, I hope it is that WMATA will seek the counsel and advice of all affected neighborhoods much earlier in the process. WMATA must understand the needs and expectations of the surrounding communities. While we can never expect everybody to be happy when a new development project is proposed for their neighborhood, all parties must work together in good faith so that transit-oriented development can successfully serve the needs of the commuting public and the neighborhoods that coexist with transit centers. Again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my concerns with you today.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call Mayor Kathy Porter, City of Takoma Park. Good evening, Mayor Porter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairman Mack. My name is Kathy Porter, and I'm the mayor of the City of Takoma Park, Maryland. I'm here today with my colleagues from the City Council, staff of our city government, and many of my constituents to communicate our deep concerns about the negative aspects of some of the sale of the proposed property at the Takoma Metro and the impacts it would have on transit access in our community. I want to make three main points. First, the proposed design for the Takoma Metro Station violates one of the basic principles of transit-oriented development. Rather than increasing access to transit, it would actually impede many transit users getting to the station. Second, this poor design is the result of a flawed process that put the transit needs of the station second to the space needed for development. In fact, after the mistakes made in the process of planning the station, WMATA changed its joint development guidelines to prevent this kind of outcome at another station. Third, the contract for the sale of the land at the Takoma Metro Station is very unusual in that WMATA bears the cost of replacing the transit facilities that have to be moved to permit the housing development. In fact, the way the contract is written, after paying to replace the transit facilities, WMATA could receive little or nothing from the sale of this land. Let me deal with each of these issues one by one. The dedicated space for buses in the new plan is greatly reduced, leaving room for only 10 bus bays and no real layover spaces. The layover spaces that are drafted actually exist in the medians and would be very difficult for buses to access. Under the proposed design, even more seriously, there is no room for any expansion of bus space in the future. WMATA staff has maintained that they feel 10 bus bays and 2 layover spaces will be sufficient to meet the needs both now and in the foreseeable future. Despite the recommendations of the regional bus study and the Takoma transportation study that more bus bays will be needed, this plan limits the bus bay area in such a way that expansion in the future is impossible. Given the increasing traffic congestion in Montgomery County, I believe that funding for transit is likely to increase over the next several years on the Maryland side. With new development in downtown Silver Spring and planned redevelopment in Long Branch and Takoma Langley, there is every reason to believe that the demand for bus service at the Takoma Metro Station will increase. Failing to plan for that increase, and in fact precluding additional bus service to the station, is short-sighted and counter to the goal of increasing the use of transit. The proposed parking lot would contain only half the parking spaces of the present lot. Increasing the number of parking spaces by building a second parking deck, as has been as an option, would be very expensive. As you saw earlier, the proposed plan shows a 75-space surface parking lot. The developer's own estimates show that the cost of increasing the number of spaces to about 130 by building a 2-level parking garage would be about $5.7 million. This is $2.8 million more than their estimate of the cost of the surface lot. We updated their figures based on data from a construction management firm and found that based on current trends in construction costs and addressing some insufficiencies in the estimates, current costs for the surface parking lot are more likely to be about $3.6 million, and for the 2-story parking structure, about $7 million. The circulation on this site is very problematic, with buses and cars sharing the only entrance on Eastern Avenue and sharing the bus turnaround circle. The proposed plans will lead to a great deal of frustration with on-site traffic congestion. Cars and buses share a single entrance. This will cause delay to the buses exiting in that direction, as do most of the buses headed toward Takoma Park. In addition, because the designated passenger drop-off sites are far from the entrances to the station, and the bus turnaround circle is right next to the elevator entrance, it is very easy to predict that cars will stop in the bus turnaround circle to drop off passengers, blocking buses trying to turn around. In spite of the planned route for the Metropolitan Branch Trail coming right through the station, bicycle access to the station is reduced and there's not even any land allowed for the bicycle trail. The second point I made is about the flawed planning process. The design process for this site was done backwards. A transit-oriented process would begin with an assessment of transit needs and a determination of the space needed for transit facilities, then would allocate the remaining space to development. Instead, the housing development was designed first, and the transit facilities were crammed into the remaining space. These problems caused WMATA to rethink its joint development process, which we very much appreciate, and issue new guidelines. The new joint development projects put transit first, but this better approach has not been applied to the Takoma Metro Station. Unfortunately, the mistakes made in this process were not corrected, leaving our station as the example of bad planning that led to reform in the joint development process. The third point I'm making is the problems with the contract. Besides the problems I mentioned, the major concern we have is that the contract with the developer is structured in such a way as to leave WMATA with little or no profit from the sale. Joint development projects are supposed to bring money to the metro system and to promote the kind of development around metro stations that increase ridership. Because of the structure of this contract, however, this sale is likely to bring little or no money into the system and may in fact raise WMATA's operating and capital costs in the future. When this project was first proposed, an application was made to the Federal Transit Administration. The developer purchasing the property was to pay $7.3 million for the land and pay for the replacement of the transit facilities. But due to changes in the contract, the developer is now obligated to pay between $7.3 and $9 million for the property, and very surprisingly to us, will be able to deduct the cost of replacing the transit facilities from his purchase price. Contrary to the guidelines of the Joint Development Program and normal practice in land development, Under this contract, WMATA will in essence pay for changes in its infrastructure that benefit the private developer. When all is said and done, WMATA will make little or no money from this project and will be left with a station that doesn't work for transit. My constituents and yours will have more trouble getting to the station that is their main access point to the Metro Rail system. And all because of a planning process that failed. I ask you to please take another look at this troubled design and give us a station that will serve both of our communities, perhaps even better than the present station. Our community and the Transit Board and the WMATA Board have a shared interest in making this a well-designed and accessible gateway to the Metro system.
Thank you, Mayor
very
Porter.
much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the audience not to applaud when the speakers, while the speakers are speaking or when they're finished. We have a very long evening. We want to be as efficient as possible, so I beg your indulgence in that. Our next speaker, and I did want to let Mayor Porter finish her statement, and so I allowed her to go over the allotted time, but I will be asking other speakers to remain within the 5 minutes and 3 minutes that you're allotted. I call the next speaker, Councilmember George Leventhal, at-large council member for Montgomery County.
Good evening, Ms. Mack. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify tonight. My name is George Leventhal, and I am an at-large member of the Montgomery County Council. Although I currently serve as president of the council, my testimony tonight is delivered on my own behalf. The Montgomery County Council has not taken any position on the proposed Takoma Metro development. In addition to serving on the County Council, I'm a neighbor of the proposed development, residing with my wife and children at 7336 Piney Branch Road in Takoma Park, Maryland. As a frequent user of the Takoma Metro station, I do see a benefit to locating more housing in close proximity to the station. At night, the station's environs are poorly lit, and there has been perennial concern about crime. Additional housing could provide more lighting and nighttime activity that could deter crime. As a general matter, I support the concept of housing near Metro, if wisely designed, as consistent with the principles of smart growth. That said, the primary purpose of WMATA is to provide access to public transportation. I strongly urge the WMATA Board not to approve any plan that would make access to Takoma Metro less efficient for Metro bus, ride-on bus, pedestrians, or bicyclists. In addition, I am concerned that adequate parking should continue to be available for Metro users. Finally, although I recognize that this proposed development is located in the District of Columbia, it is very important that WMATA acknowledge the valid concerns of Metro users who reside adjacent to the project in the state of Maryland, such as those you will hear tonight. I hope a reasonable compromise can be achieved that takes into account all of these valid policy objectives. Thank you again for letting me testify.
Thank you for your testimony. Councilmember Joy Austin Lane, Ward 1, City of Takoma Park. Beg pardon, she's delayed. Fine. Councilmember Colleen Clay, Ward 2, City of Takoma Park.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you regarding the proposed sale of land at the Takoma Metro Station and its impact on transit services. I'm Colleen Clay. I'm a council member of Ward 2 in Takoma Park. Residents of my ward live within a mile or so of the Takoma Metro Station. My constituents walk, bike, and bus to the station. 5 bus routes that go through my ward terminate at the Takoma Metro Station, right on routes 12, 13, 16, 18, and 25. WMATA buses travel through Ward 2 to the station as well. I use Metro every day practically and rent a bike locker at the station. My ward depends on access to this station. I happen to be a professional city planner, and I'm very supportive of transit-oriented development, and I support proposals that increase foot traffic in the Takoma Metro area. I've come to speak to you today because after reviewing the proposals for the Takoma Metro site, it's clear to me that the development of this site under the current contract conditions will actually result in a reduction in transit accessibility, both now and into the near future. I know you're going to hear a lot of detail tonight from concerned citizens and officials about specific objections to various elements of this plan, from aesthetic design details to broad concerns about traffic congestion, loss of open space, and a decline in transit accessibility. And as a planner and as a public official myself, I know that when such a large project is on the table, you can get mired in those very important details in formulating acceptable responses and then lose sight of the bigger picture. And I would like to take just a step back and look at that big picture. There are multiple reasons the sale was proposed. When this proposal was initially put forth, there was a need for development in the surrounding area. The land was less valuable, the construction costs were lower, there was less interest in the site, and the project was thought crucial in spurring additional development in the area. It was an accomplishment on the part of Metro to get a bidder on the property with a track record like EYA has. However, as the development process moved forward, it became clear that the site couldn't meet all the needs envisioned by the planners and the board, and this is evident if you review the process of the developing proposal. The goals include increasing transit accessibility, spurring development and revitalization, making enough profit from the land sale to fund the site improvements, and to maintain or improve existing site amenities, improve the area traffic flow, and increase public safety. That translates into 4 critical site functions: housing, bus space, parking, and open space, all while maintaining a workable foot and vehicle traffic flow. I think it rapidly became clear to EYA, Metro, and the community that there was not room for everything. And the first things to go were half of the parking and western access, which is a key component for the disabled, which is a big issue for me. Residents complained about the loss of transit access and parking, and then some parking is replaced and the costs go up. So the project will likely cost more than the contract on the land. And finally, the transit bays are squeezed tighter. Future transit estimates are downplayed, layovers are adjusted in order to meet today's bus needs, and by this point, it's obvious that no one is going to get what they want, except possibly the developer, and they're probably not very happy either. I think you get the picture. Every time you solve one site constraint with this project, you negatively affect another goal. It's become obvious that the site is unworkable. And in the meantime, other development has come online, negating the need for the housing on the site. The one remaining tangible benefit is the housing. I would put forth that even at a bargain price of as low as $50,000 a unit, the housing that you would gain would not be worth the loss of the transit access, which is so critical to this community. In spite of all of this, I would like to suggest that this process is not yet a failure. This is how the planning process works sometimes. In fact, this actually could be a great case study. The only question left to me in that regard is whether this is going to be a case study that's taught citizen participation in the planning process, and it's going to be titled Metro Board Averts Development Fiasco After Citizen Input Details Flaws. Or is it going to be a series of headlines how the Metro development didn't work, that other communities are going to be able to point to as a cause to fight transit-oriented development? Please remember that transit is first in transit-oriented development, and I think it would really be a shame if this project became sort of the cause celeb for fighting against transit-oriented development around metro stations, because as I said when I started, it is very important. I'm very supportive of it, and if I thought that if I could see a way that this would work, I would be standing up here being a cheerleader for it. But really, you look at all the elements, and it just can't work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Clay. I now call Councilmember Bruce Williams.
Would you like to have Councilmember Austin Lane speak? She's now here.
Sure, fine.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chairman Mack, members of the board, I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you concerning the proposed sale of land. My name is Joy Austin Lane. I'm the council member for Ward 1 in Takoma Park, Maryland. My district is immediately adjacent to the Takoma Metro Station. A number of my constituents' homes face the Metro property. All of my ward is within walking distance of the station, and many of my constituents do walk there. 10 bus routes through my ward terminate at the Takoma Metro. In my ward, there's a 187-unit apartment building for elderly and disabled persons called Victory Tower. Many of the Victory Tower residents ride the bus to the station or go to the station by car. They regularly use the elevator entrance. Ward 1 also includes the Takoma Park side of the Old Takoma Business Association, and the association includes businesses in both Takoma, D.C. and Takoma Park, Maryland. The association is concerned with the health of the businesses, the attractiveness of the streetscape, the connectivity of the business district as it goes past the Takoma Metro, and the ease of walking and parking for its patrons. Also in my ward is the Takoma Park Silver Spring campus of Montgomery College, just down the Metropolitan Branch Bike Trail from the Takoma Metro Station. The campus is in the process of building new facilities and renovating its existing campus, and it is a commuter campus with no student housing. The proposal on the table does not meet the needs of my constituents. Under the plans before you today, a congested bus and car circle will block easy access to the elevator for the elderly patrons. The business district will face difficult traffic and parking problems in the area. Bike storage is reduced and bicycle paths are missing from the plans. A constrained area for buses means that flexibility for expanded bus service for college students is very limited. There are other ways of developing the Takoma Metro site that would bring more money to Metro while enhancing access to transit and meeting community goals. Many of these ideas were explored at the March 4th work session, which I commend you for holding. The proposal before you is not the right fit for this space, and I hope that Metro can move on. Take the time to determine what transit facilities are needed both now and in the future for the Takoma Metro site, and make that aspect of the station work first. If there is excess developable land and developing that land is consistent with goals that this community has laid out, then proceed. But I believe the time to stop pushing for this unworkable and inappropriate plan is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Bruce Williams, Ward 3, City of Takoma Park.
Good evening, Chair Matt. Thank you for this opportunity to speak concerning the proposed sale of land at the Takoma Metro Station and its impact on transit access. As you said, my name is Bruce Williams, and I'm council member from Ward 3. Residents of my ward live as close as a quarter mile.
Everybody should speak up. We can't hear anything you're saying.
I'm trying. Want to do anything with the volume? Okay. Residents of my ward live between a quarter of a mile and 1 mile from the Takoma Metro. Many of my constituents walk or ride buses to the station. 4 bus routes go through my ward and terminate at the Metro. They are ride-on routes 12, 13, 16, and 18. I use Metro myself, taking it to Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments board meetings, other meetings hosted by COG, and other events in the region. When I take Metro, it's usually for midday meetings, so I'm one of the people who uses the existing parking at the Metro site. I know that if I try to park on site anytime after about 11 o'clock, I may not find a spot. Reducing this parking by any number will likely cause me to drive to meetings rather than to use Metro. Multiply my situation by others who use Metro in the same way, and transit use will decrease if the parking area is reduced. This would not be a responsible action by the WMATA board. I'd also like to reinforce a point about future need for bus bays. Making decisions about the number of bus bays needed in the future should not be limited to only considering those routes which are currently funded in any agency's capital budget. You need to retain the flexibility to address needs 10, 15, 20 years out and beyond. If you sell land necessary to do anything additional beyond this current proposal, you're constraining your own ability to address future transit needs. When we passed our recent City Council resolution regarding this proposal, I commented, we're for transit-oriented development. We are for smart. It isn't smart and it isn't transit-oriented. As you'll hear over the course of this evening, this proposal is a bad idea. Please take this opportunity to do the right thing and make sure that your primary function, transit, works at this station. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. I next call Councilmember Terry Siemens.
Chair Mack and members of the board, thank you for this opportunity to speak concerning the proposed sale of land at the Takoma Park Metro Station and its impact on transit access. I'm Terry Siemens, council member of Takoma Park Ward 4. My constituents are primarily low-income renters, many of whom do not own cars and therefore depend on public transportation. People from my neighborhood get to the Takoma Park Metro Station by walking, taxi cab, or, most often, riding a bus. They ride on one of the 4 bus routes that go through my ward and terminate at the Takoma Metro. That's right on routes 3, 14, 24, and 25. As gasoline prices rise and force other costs up, more and more of my neighbors are turning to mass transportation to save money. My constituents and I are very concerned that, if implemented, WMATA's current plan will make access to the Metro less convenient and unsafe for many. It presents serious problems for seniors and those with physical disabilities. Furthermore, this plan does not adequately provide for anticipated future expansion. And if the transportation planners have underestimated the community's future dependency on mass transit, the plan eliminates the possibility of correcting the mistake. The land will be sold. The problem is centered in the priority of the design goals. My constituents ask that you throw out this design and set the transportation and community requirements before you decide what land is available for sale. With a transportation-based design, mobility-challenged riders will not have to cross unregulated bus lanes and travel over 100 feet to the elevator as this design requires. A community-sensitive transportation-based design will put bus layover bays off the streets. A design that isn't focused on developer needs will provide an off-street location for taxis and kiss-and-ride drivers to drop off passengers. My constituents are concerned that your design puts their needs at the bottom of the list. They're concerned that this plan is aimed to provide housing for people who can afford other transportation than public. With your plan, each homeowner will have space for 2 cars, while the people who need public transportation must compromise now and give up hope for the future. Please clear the slate and design for transportation needs before you sell any land. My constituents are so concerned about this, they're circulating a petition. We have a number of signatures already, but we'll turn the petition in before the deadline, I believe, next week. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next I call Councilmember Mark Urwich, Ward 5.
Someday my name will be done right. Mark Elrich. And it's amazing how persistent this is. Thank you all for giving us the opportunity to testify tonight. I'm Mark Elrich. I'm a council member in Ward 5 in Takoma Park. Residents of my ward live between 3/4 of a mile and 1.5 miles from the Takoma Metro. And many of my constituents ride buses to the station. There are 7 bus routes that go through my ward and terminate at the Takoma Metro, right on routes 12, 13, 14, 16, 18, 24, and 25. My ward includes a large number of apartments, and because of the way these apartments were developed, there's little off-street parking for the residents. My ward depends heavily on mass transit. My ward also includes 2 major institutions, Washington Adventist Hospital and Columbia Union College. The college has both a resident student population and adult evening classes. The hospital, which at one point announced plans to leave Takoma Park, has now put those plans on hold. I'll remind you that those plans are on hold and they go forward with any development on the site or any of the other possible sites in the immediate vicinity. The hospital will be expanded, not shrunk, and the need for the hospital will be increased, not reduced. The traffic impact study by EYA stated that the hospital will be moving and so discounted future traffic related to the hospital. If the hospital stays, bus service will remain needed for employees, visitors, and patients. If it moves, another entity is surely going to take its place, and we're all aware that the site will be intensively developed, even in the absence of the hospital. So it's likely that the demand for ridership is going to remain the same. No reason to assume it's going to be less. The process by which the Takoma Metro Joint Development Project came was badly flawed. The land was advertised for joint development before the area needed for transit and community goals for the site were determined. Because of the controversy of the Takoma Metro project generated when it first became public, WMATA looked at its policies and saw that the joint development process needed to be changed. The new process is better, and I've seen it work in public meetings concerning the Silver Spring Metro and the Forest Glen Metro.
I wanted to digress and talk a little bit about the Forest Glen Metro hearing that I was at. Representatives of WMATA got up at the Forest Glen Metro hearing and said that the process that was used at the Takoma Park Station was badly flawed. And my reaction was, I advise the citizens, first of all, of Forest Glen to be wary because of what we've experienced here. But more fundamentally, if you're acknowledging that publicly that the process that you used is badly flawed, why continue to go by the results of a badly flawed process? It seems to me that having said that you would not do this process the same anywhere else, you do have the opportunity now to do the process right in Takoma Park, and we're asking you to go back and do the process right. I also attended a Silver Spring presentation by WMATA on the enhancements to the center there, and I was struck by two comments that were made there. One was they couldn't stop talking about the importance of the public park for that station, and that public park is just an enhancement to the station itself. It's not even a buffer to the broader residential community. This public park is both an essential component of the station and serves a dual purpose as a buffer to the community. So I was struck at a very different way that our park has been talked about compared to the park in Silver Spring. The other thing that struck me was that there's a substantial increase in bus bays in the transit center in Silver Spring, and it's not based on anything that's in the current capital budget of the county. It's based on future projections, and there is nowhere near the same accommodation given to future expansion of the metro at the Takoma Park site that's given to the expansion of ride-on usage at the Silver Spring site. And it seems to me that the principles in both ought to be applied. The other thing that your representative said at Silver Spring was that if the transit function of the station was in any way impeded, that they would sacrifice development density to ensure the functioning of the station as a transit station. In other words, there they seem to get the message right. The primary function of Metro is to assure that that station functions to serve the Metro and to provide access of riders to the Metro. That is clearly the reverse of what's happening in this station. Everything that's being done is being bent around the needs of the developer, and you've got memos that basically talk about this in terms of the needs of the developer, and we find that very problematic. This site ought to be developed as a Metro site first. You've seen proposals. We're not saying nothing should be built there, and you've seen proposals that allow substantially the identical density or number of units just configured in a different way. And I have to say it troubles me that if WMATA were to replace the parking, you would wind up with no net gain from this project. If you were to build a garage and pay for that garage as required in your agreement, you would realize nothing from the sale of this property. And that seems to me to defeat the whole purpose of why WMATA claims to be selling off property. So we're asking you to please not go through with the sale at this point and come up with what the station needs to be, and then put this thing out for a developer to develop the station with a focus on the transit functions first. Thank you very much for your time tonight, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Councilmember Elrich.
Thank you.
Next, Councilmember Douglas Berry.
That's a relatively easy name to pronounce, Chairman. And thank you very much for getting me on so very much. Pleasure to be here tonight, and I know that the decisions before you are very complex and very difficult, and I don't envy you the time that will be required and the tough decisions that lie ahead. All the more reason that there is no room for error, and it's so important to get it right. Residents of my ward live within a couple of miles of Takoma Metro Station. My ward includes the intersection of University Boulevard and New Hampshire Avenue, the future site of the Takoma-Langley stop on the Purple Line. This intersection has bus ridership numbers that are higher than those at dozens of Metro Rail stations in the Washington metropolitan area. I have been told they are higher than at any other regional location that is not a Metro Rail station. To help accommodate these riders safely, a new bus transit center has been designed by the state of Maryland, and construction is due to begin soon. This will increase the ridership on the bus lines coming out of that and over in this direction. The new transit center will be designed to maximize pedestrian safety and will be an attractive focal point for the neighborhood. Large numbers of residents in this area do not own cars and are completely dependent on public transportation. Families that do own cars will be more likely to ride the bus once the transit station is completed. For this reason, ridership is likely to increase substantially. In addition, the Takoma-Langley area is to be the subject of a major planning effort, redeveloping it as a central business district and destination in its own right. Funding for the first part of this work is in the current Prince George's County budget. The major connection between this busy area and the Takoma Metro Station is right on Route 16. Information concerning this bus route was left out of the traffic impact analysis submitted by EYA, thus significantly undercounting the number of bus trips at the Takoma Metro Station. Bus Route 18 also connects my constituents to the station. What a shame to improve the opportunities to connect with the Takoma Metro Station just at the time when transit access at the station will be constrained. Rather than proceed with a poorly planned joint development project, let's put the transit back in transit-oriented development at the Takoma Metro. There is time to correct the situation with the Takoma Metro. There is time to acknowledge the transit needs of the Takoma Park Metro and Takoma DC communities. There is time to allow the Metro Board to live up to the financial responsibilities for receiving fair compensation for the sale of public property and for not obligating WMATA to future transit facility expenditures. Now, I've got to run and catch the next number 16. I have a transfer that's going to run out in a few minutes, and I know that they don't run very often, which is why I have to rush. But I know in the future, as ridership grows, the use of number 16 will increase, and I and my neighbors on the other side of Takoma Park hope that there will be enough bus bays to accommodate us in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barry. I next call City Attorney Susan Zilber, City of Takoma Park.
Thank you very much, all the WMATA officials, for allowing us tonight to address you and to talk with you. We are really concerned, as you can see by the other officials from Takoma Park who have spoken, and there'll be many members of the public who will speak as well. I will try not to repeat many of the fine points that have been made by the other officials, but to stress some of the really serious legal concerns we have in addition to these very public policy deep concerns that we have. First of all, we have great problems with the way the WMATA compact itself has been violated. There's a much longer legal memo that's been given to WMATA that addresses this with much more development. For now, let me just say that there just hasn't been the right process. I'm now talking going way back to 2000 when the solicitation first occurred. Basically, what's happened is there's been a foregone conclusion that about 76% of the land at this station was going to be sold and transferred, and the only thing left for us to discuss tonight was what modifications to the facilities would happen. That's not the way the compact reads, and as we discussed in our legal memo, we disagree with minutes from the board, with other decisions that have built on that assumption, and we think that, as many people have said, maybe it's best to start over. I also want to be a little shocked and surprised by some of the presentation by Mr. Lester, the EYA, at the beginning of this program, because I guess everybody in this room knows that the transit enhancement plan that was put up on this screen has never been shared with the public before. It's not been shared with the governments. It's not been shared with the planning agencies. The first time it appeared was tonight. How, under due process principles and the compact principles, can one respond to that supposed transit enhancement plan in any depth when you don't even get to see it before you walk in the door? I'm very surprised by that, and I would like to see you, again, rethink the way this whole thing is being done. The good news, and this is good news, is that, in fact, WMATA can terminate the contract today. The contract is now one at will, which either WMATA or EYA could terminate, and we could start over without any exposure.
This is not swampland in Florida that we're talking about. This is valuable land that many different entities would be interested in providing alternative options for its development, ones that might be much more not only attractive to the community, but much more importantly, that would be more compatible with the transit use of the site. Most importantly, and it was said by some of the previous speakers, the current contract is a sale. It's irreparable. If too much land is given away and some new needs for transit occur down the line in the future, 10 years from now, 20 years, 50, 100 years from now, there is nothing WMATA can do. The land would be gone. Most of WMATA's current joint development projects, it's my understanding, are more likely to be done now as long-term leases. We would like WMATA to consider in the new contract, if this contract is terminated, a lease instead of a sale. Next, I would like to simply point out that although the EYA representative made a point that this whole development comes under various planning documents like the Central District Plan, that those very documents are violated in many, many critical ways in this plan. I don't have the time to describe them all now. Again, they're in my written comments. But everything but from the number of bus bays to the idea of sharing the bus circle between buses and cars, to the change in the access for the handicapped, to the elimination of the buffer between the apartment buildings and the roadway leading to Eastern Avenue. Those are all things that are specifically dealt with in the Central District Plan and have been violated. Also, the transportation plan that was carefully paid for by both the City of Takoma Park and the District of Columbia, again, has not been honored in many ways in this particular plan. In sum, I would simply say that there is not adequate benefit for the public or for WMATA from all the cost and disruption that is caused by this plan, which because so much of the land is being sold, requires such an extreme reconfiguring of the transit facilities. Not only may Metro lose ridership, and we would lose if they would lose if actually there isn't the adequate parking that we all are concerned about, but it also doesn't make any financial sense for WMATA, as we will provide in our written comments based on our appraisal of the land and our construction analysis of the actual costs.
Would you wrap up this?
Yes, it's my last sentence. WMATA, if you go ahead with this, could end up with, yes, one additional bus bay, but with almost no money, no land, and no future for our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I call Suzanne Ludlow, Community and Government Liaison, City of Takoma Park.
Good evening. I'm Suzanne Ludlow, and if I may, I would like to point out some items on this board. Let's see if the mic works here. I'd like to describe very briefly how the site would work in terms of from here, the main entrance at Carroll Street, the elevator entrance, which is currently off the parking lot at the station. This is Carroll Street, Cedar Street. For those of you who know it, the 7-Eleven is over here. There are homes over here and apartments over here. The proposed, follow the speaker. The proposed development moves the current entrance to the bus bays closer to the main entrance, which reduces the amount of area for pedestrians entering the main entrance. And this is problematic not only because it's smaller, but there's also a grade change on Carroll Street. There's several steps now, and it would make that entrance a little more constrained. The bus bays are here for a bus to enter. They would come off of Carroll Street to leave. They do a turn in this shared car bus turnaround and come back out, or they go around and they exit through a shared car bus route to Eastern Avenue. One of the biggest problems with this plan is that the location of the turnaround is very close to the elevator entrance. and there's no way to drop somebody off to the elevator entrance without going into that circle, unless you park a long distance away. For those of us with elderly relatives, it's likely that we're going to stop in this transit circle unless there's a transit police officer standing right there, which Right-On has told us they may require, making sure that we don't drop somebody off close to the elevator. On the other hand, we recognize that we do try to serve our handicapped residents. Because of the narrowness of the site that would be retained by WMATA in a small amount, there's no room for expansion of the bus bays unless WMATA were to buy back the park, to take some of the homes, or pay for some extension through the metro tunnel, the elevator tunnel, to Spring Place Northwest and develop that, which would be quite expensive, although it is a recommendation of the Tacoma Central District Plan. The parking lot, people have addressed already, reduces the current 150 space parking lot to 75 or 128. Currently, the parking lot is a short-term parking lot only, which means that people can't stay there all day and commuter park, and it has turnover, so more than 150 cars go through the lot on any one day. One of the things that has struck me, and let's see, I think I brought it along. I grabbed a little car out of my son's car drawer and wanted to show you what it would be like to drive through the site. Enter off of Eastern Avenue, and you want to find a parking space, and you come in and you can't find one because it's very small. As you exit, you're immediately opposite an alleyway that goes into the interior part of this development plan. You're likely to cross over because there are parking spaces sprinkled around throughout here, and you're going to try to look for one. Unfortunately, these alleyways are only 20 feet wide and they're dead ends, and you're going to have to back out or do some interesting turnarounds. You can come and try to find a parking space. The kiss and ride spaces are on the southern part of this road, so you would need to go through and around the traffic circle and come back here. If you happen to be in the unfortunate situation of somebody letting somebody off for the elevator with a bus waiting behind, you've all of a sudden got traffic congestion. And it's my recommendation that there not be parking spaces throughout here. I think that adds to the congestion of the site and would cause more problems than having them. Having the parking in one location is a much better way for the site to work. As I mentioned, handicapped patrons are particularly harmed in this project because right now they can be dropped off very close to this elevator. Now there's no way to get to it very closely. You can park in a handicapped space. There's also a handicapped space here, and you'd have to do all of this walk to get over there. But it is a very long way.
I asked you to wrap up.
Yes. And what I'd like to say is that we have problems throughout this site, and I won't do all this, but we have significant problems here and at several other locations in this narrow place, but there is a solution, and that solution is looking at the rest of the property. Find a way to make the transit work with the land you have available, and then decide what to do with the remainder. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your visuals.
Thanks. I had to borrow the car. That was the fun part.
Yeah, I agree. Before I call the next witness, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Elliot Doones. He is the legislative director for the Honorable Eleanor Holmes Norton, and as many of you know who have been involved with this project, she's taken quite an interest in the project and wanted to have her representative here to listen to what the witnesses have to say tonight. So thank you and welcome to the hearing. Our next witness is A&C Commissioner Sarah Green, Advisory Neighborhood Commission for BO1.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Green. I am the Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for B01. My single-member district includes the Takoma Metro Station and about 2,000 people who live very close around it. I've lived in the community for about 30 years, and I also want to just note here that I am speaking for myself and my constituents. I am not representing the views of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4B. That said, I feel extremely comfortable in saying that the majority of residents of Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4B do not support this proposal. And right here, and I could put it down with a thumb, but I will not, represent the signatures of about 900 residents. They're all, majority live in this neighborhood in the District of Columbia. These are from a few years ago up until yesterday. We will submit a full copy of all of these signatures to the record. They show that people do not support this plan. And those who most do not believe we need this land for future transit. But the few who do want appropriate development at the station do not believe you've got it. You have not been able to do that so far. And there are a couple of reasons why. One is that, for example, WMATA has argued for years that it's a smart growth agency, that it knows what smart growth is, as, you know, with quotes around it, capital S, capital G, that it has adopted it, that it embraces it. And they have also said that they would fulfill the terms of the Takoma Central District Plan. In fact, Alicia Hill, who is sitting up front, was at most of those planning meetings. She didn't get involved in the process as we asked. We asked our transit agency to get involved as the largest landowner. She didn't get involved, but she did stand in the back of the room and she did promise, along with EYA representatives, that whatever the community decided, they would do it in terms of the Takoma Central District Plan. And as other people have stated, this has not happened. I'm not going to repeat that. But one of the big issues in my community is the two-car garage proposal here. And it's just really ludicrous. Most of the, I don't have a two-car garage. I have an old big home. I don't have a two-car garage at my property. Most people in Takoma, long-time residents with old homes, we don't have two-car garages. The new communities, the new buildings that are right around that station, they have underground parking. They don't have dedicated private two-car garages. You want to put these things about 150 feet away from a fare card machine? This means that you want to market this land that the federal government bought. You want to market it to people that have two cars. Instead of saying to the community out there looking to buy homes, looking to live near a metro station, hey, you don't want to have a car? You want to use mass transit solely? You want to be one of those smart growth people who live in our community? Come here. You could do that. You could market this property to people who want to use mass transit in a very big way, but you aren't doing that. Instead, you're going to build two-car garages, and you're going to have people feeding into them with private alleys, and you see the congestion that's been pointed out. I really don't have time for a lot more to say, but I just want to point out one other major issue that's not been raised so far that really impacts my constituents, and that is the buffer. I don't know, I have 125 families, something like that, in my area, and they live on Eastern Avenue, and some of them come very close to that metro station. Right now, they have a 50-foot landscaped buffer to help screen their ears, their eyes, their lungs from the pollution and the noise of that station. This was planned from the beginning, and there's a reason why. And they're going to lose this based on your plan, and that's not fair. And the other people who are going to lose out are the people who come in these townhouses. They're going to get a lot of pollution also. And that's going to cause them to oppose any more bus lines or any increase in bus service at that site. So this is another way that this site is mass transit unfriendly.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, Ms. Green.
Well, I just want to conclude by telling you that you can do a much better job. You've been asked to do a much better job over the 6 years that we've been talking about this, and I really hope that you will do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next witness is Judy Jones, Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner for Beals Veterans. Judy Jones is not present. The next witness is Anita M. Harrison, District of Columbia Office of Planning.
Good evening. My name is Anita Hairston, and I'm with the District of Columbia Office of Planning. I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the proposed relocation of bus facilities and parking changes at the Takoma Metro Rail Station. The District of Columbia Office of Planning supports the amendment of WMATA's Mass Transit Plan to realize the development of approximately 6.8 acres of real property located at the Takoma Metro Rail Station. The reconfiguration of the transit facilities will afford the opportunity to realize one of the district's key priorities, creation of new housing opportunities within close proximity of a transit station. In order to encourage this type of development, in 2002, the district initiated a community planning process for the commercial district located adjacent to the Takoma station. The result of this planning process was the Takoma Central District Plan, which was formally adopted by the DC Council in June 2002. Among the plan's chief objectives was to, one, promote a consistent and integrated planning and design approach to the commercial and mixed-use areas of Takoma for the benefit of the entire neighborhood, and also to reinforce development and revitalization initiatives that are based on smart growth principles for transit-oriented development and improved quality of life. The plan also sets forth guiding principles for the development on the metro station site. First, meet current and future transit operational requirements, understanding that the priority function of the site is to serve transit needs first, including metro and ride-on services. Second, provide open space for the community. The plan includes specific development guidance for the Takoma Metro site, such as the creation of a village green as Takoma's signature open space. And third, accommodate development that furthers smart growth and revitalization goals, such as the enhancement of the metro station as a community gateway, development of appropriately scaled infill housing, creation of a new streetscape that encourages pedestrian activity, and improvement of the existing urban fabric to link communities on both sides of the tracks. The Takoma Central District Plan and the associated 2003 Takoma Transportation Study, a joint effort of the District of Columbia and the City of Takoma Park, Maryland, both recognize that the Takoma Metro Station site must first accommodate current and future transit functions with the needs of the local business community and potential new development as a secondary consideration. In addition, both of these documents reinforce the importance of station connectivity functions, including appropriate accommodation of sidewalks, kiss and ride spaces, taxi stands, bicycle parking, shared use paths such as the Metropolitan Branch Trail. The Central District Plan and the Transportation Study recognize the important role of incorporating parking in revitalizing a commercial district. Both the Transportation Study and recent vehicle counts indicate high levels of usage in the existing lot at peak periods. It is our understanding that WMATA and other transit providers which use the station have deemed this transit facility reconfiguration plan appropriate to accommodate their present and future needs. With respect to this transit facility plan, the Office of Planning supports the alternative in which WMATA and the developer provide 128 parking spaces and a parking garage with additional spaces on planned and existing streets in lieu of a surface parking lot. In addition, the District Department of Transportation, one of our sister agencies, encourages transit-oriented development opportunities and has given their support to the Joint Development Plan. The redevelopment of the Takoma Metro site and implementation of transportation improvements is reinforced through policies and specific action steps in the revised draft District of Columbia Comprehensive Plan to be approved by the DC Council in the coming months. Since the approval of the Takoma Central District Plan in 2002, WMATA and the developer have coordinated with the Office of Planning, the District Department of Transportation, and other district agencies on the implementation of this project. Continued coordination will be essential to this project proceeding, given that any future development not related to the transit functions on the metro station site must receive approvals from the District Zoning Commission, which reviews plan unit developments, plan unit development applications, and the District's Historic Preservation Review Board, which reviews proposed projects in the Takoma Historic District. Both of these approvals will be coordinated by OP, and we look forward to working with both WMATA and the developer to realize this project. In addition, the District Department of Transportation has expressed their commitment to working with WMATA, the developer, and the City of Takoma Park, Maryland, to assist in mitigating traffic issues which may arise as a result of this development. Thank you.
Thank you, President. That ends our elected officials and our public witnesses. And so we're going to hold the rest of us to our 3-minute limit so that we can hear from everyone.
You have one more.
We have one more. Okay. All right. I understand we have 2 more. One elected official and one senator-elect. We're going to hear from you, but we're also going to ask you to please stay within the time limit, just to make sure that everybody gets a fair chance to speak. I'm going to call Faith Wheeler, who is ANC Commissioner from 4B02.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I was just about to ask if I had more time because we skipped over. In any case, I am the ANC Commissioner for 4B02. In fact, we sit in 4B02 right now. Across the street is 4B01. My single-member district is about a short block away from the metro property, a very short block away from the metro property. And so my constituents are very much impacted. In my SMD, we have a wide range. We've got young, old, some disabled, many dependent on the metro, many use it by choice. We are, as you know, an original transit-oriented development community. This is first suburb of Washington, D.C., first railroad suburb of Washington. So we're very proud of that and very much interested in our transit station working well for this community, this broad community. In the SMD, we have the 4th Street Business District, which was the original business district of the broad community of Takoma. We have several churches. We have the Takoma Theater. Across the street from this district, from this single-member district, is the Takoma Community Center, which recently has expanded with a $16 million facility with an Olympic-sized pool, which draws people from far and wide and close in as well. We have Coolidge High School, which regularly has students coming back and forth every single day using the metro. We have Walter Reed, we have the Takoma Elementary School, which also has metro riders. We have Walter Reed to the west, which, as you know, by 2011, the transformation will be started with GSA and with State Department in establishing offices there, which will be an opportunity to initiate another set of folks to use public transit, which is what we hope to do and have been working very long and hard to do for over a century here now in this community. We are very much transit-oriented and want to keep it that way. For that reason, we're rather find that the access to the transit under this proposal with WMATA and EYA is very troubling. As you've heard, I won't go over it, try not to repeat, but people walk to the metro, people bike to the metro, they bus to the metro, and they get there by car. Walking, of course, is more hazardous with the sorts of new proposals that would be initiated if WMATA indeed sells this land to EYA. Biking reduces the number of bike lockers. We have a number of bikers. Buses, it does not extend the bus bays, the number of bus bays as it could. We could fit in 13 bus bays on an alternative proposal. Under the WMATA EYA proposal, we could fit in only 10. And of course, under the WMATA EYA proposal, there would be no possibility of expansion in the future. We have to think of the future. We have no choice, whether we think we have a choice right now or not. The fact of the matter is the future does come rather fast. Now, what would WMATA get out of this proposed sale? They'd get, at most, at best, 2 days operating expenses, and less if you make other calculations. It would get whatever percentage of whatever number of riders would come from the 86 townhouses proposed. And that's very difficult to calculate. I've been emailing with transportation experts to try to get a handle on it. It's very difficult to calculate, especially at the prices of probably 700,000 to 800,000 townhouses. Which brings another aspect of income inequality. One of the trademarks of this community is diversity. It's certainly one of the trademarks that brought me to this community and a number of our people here. And this would skew income for economic diversity here rather markedly with that number of townhouses at that price. So for the two benefits that this proposed sale would bring, a little bit dubious benefits actually, or uncertain benefits, it would wreak a lot of havoc in the community. So where is the balance? It seems to me there is no balance. There would be very little gain for WMATA and a great cost for the community, a tremendous cost for the community. The parking lot reduced, the handicapped access moved further off, the 50-foot buffer reduced to practically nothing, the bus bays increased by only one with really very inadequate prospects for future use. Bike lockers, buses, cars, bikes combined in the same turnaround. No apparent improved safety features for pedestrians. One of the kiss and ride stands under the proposal would put a kiss and ride up on Carroll Street in D.C., in Carroll Street. And at that particular point, there are just 2 lanes that are westbound, 2 lanes alone. And so where would the kiss and ride folks do? Would they block one of the 2 lanes in an area which is already failing? According to DDOT's 2003 calculations, over and over again, these features make no sense, and you wonder what kind of analysis was done. It's essential that WMATA insist on doing an adequate, very professional analysis, an analysis done on current data, not on old data, not on past data. For example, the Wells Associates analysis that was of traffic impact based their analysis on DDOT's 2003 data, which said by 2012, this community around the Tacoma Metro would have a total of 305 new housing units. As we speak, we have a total of 330 units, 6 years earlier. That's 2 built and 2 approved, one with a sales office open and one with a sign up saying, call us to find out about sales. Okay, so it's extremely hard to imagine. Let me just flip it. We are at such a threshold. WMATA has such an opportunity to do something wonderful in this community, or to go forward with these incredibly questionable likelihoods out of which you couldn't back out of. You couldn't resurrect your mistake. You couldn't correct them.
Ms. Wheeler, can I ask you to wrap up, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would simply like to urge you to please look very carefully at these analyses. You might want to do with some of the analyses done already. Just to say that in institutions whose business it is to carry out development projects, analyses are done prior to the project ever even being presented to the board. We have two institutions in this city, the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank, both of which require at least 6 analyses done, completed, before a project proposal is ever even presented to the board of directors. And they are technical, economic, financial, environmental, social, and gender, and I understand more in the World Bank, so that you have a pretty clear idea of what the impact would be before.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I call, is that Jemin Raskin?
Thank you very much. My name is Jamie Raskin, and I live on Holly Avenue in Tacoma Park, just a few blocks from the Metro, which my family uses every day and some days 2 or 3 times. Taken a strong interest in the proposed development, and I guess what I want to say is that WMATA's goal here obviously has to be to enhance the station, to improve transit access and circulation, and to upgrade transit coordination among different modes of transportation. And so after studying this, I've become convinced that there's got to be a better project proposal out there, which people in the community would be prepared to accept and to embrace. This plan is just beset with problems and difficulties that will come back to haunt us very quickly, not even in the distant future. The transportation facilities that we now have will be reduced to less than 2 acres of land after resale and development, leaving all of our transportation channels and modalities on a pinched little island with little room for maneuver and no room for growth in the future, when we know that the demand for public bus transportation and metro transportation is going to be skyrocketing over the next several decades. We need at least 11 bus bays on site in addition to layover space, but the contract provides for only 10, and the space for buses to remain idle is reduced under the proposal. And there's no room for future expansion when we know that public transportation is going to be increasing, and we need to increase it and to accommodate it. It's a similar story with the parking spaces, as many of the witnesses have explained. And as far as I can tell, by using the Metro, that parking lot is nearly always full, and sometimes it's very hard to find a parking space as it is. And the idea that we would cut the number of spaces in half is extraordinary to me. The buses, the cars, and bikes will be forced to share the same traffic circle. There will be major disruption, reduced access for our disabled neighbors, and reduced space available for bike parking and for storage. And so I've got to wonder whether this flawed result reflects a set of inverted assumptions. It seems as if we began with the real estate development project, the housing development project first, and then organized the transit around it. But surely public policy demands, and your mandate demands, that we begin with the transit needs and imperatives first, and then organize any housing development around the development of the best possible transit plan that we can come up with. Conceivably, we could disregard all of these considerations, which strike me as very compelling, if there were a great financial deal out there that somehow WMATA could convert a huge windfall on this into transit development in other places. But as other witnesses have explained, once we get done with paying for all of the replacement facilities, we're talking about a couple of $1 million left at best. That seems like a very bad deal, especially considering that we're giving away the treasure of this public property forever. My grandmother used to say that the the government shouldn't sell land because they're not making any more of it. What's wrong with coming up with a lease arrangement for some excellent development that conforms to all of the transit needs and values of the community? So I would just urge you guys to take a second look at this. You have a community that is not in any kind of NIMBY mode. It's a community that's completely committed to public transit and transportation, that's committed to the development of housing possibilities for all of our neighbors, and committed to a community where people stand together. And this proposal just is not consistent with the kind of transportation values that we have and the kind of community that we're building. And so I urge you to take another look. Thanks so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Once again, I'll ask you, please refrain from applauding. I next call Cheryl Court, Executive Director, Washington Regional Network for Livable Communities.
Thank you, Chairman.
Hi, Cheryl. How are you?
Good. My name is Cheryl Court. I'm the Executive Director for the Washington Regional Network for Livable Communities. We're a nonprofit working on essentially smart growth for urban communities. And we have been involved with the question of what kind of redevelopment at the Takoma Metro Station would do the most to enhance transit access, improve the station area and larger community, and meet the growing need for more housing at transit. We'd like to reiterate our support for the 2002 Takoma Central District Plan, which we also were quite actively involved in, and the redevelopment of the Metro Station site into housing, shops, and a village green. Also support returning some of that land to the public tax rolls. We believe that more housing would be appropriate at this site, but the proposed plans do advance the overall goal of providing more housing opportunities close to Metro in a pedestrian-oriented environment. This means more people in our growing region can choose to drive less and walk and bicycle and ride transit more. I've provided much more detailed analysis in my testimony, but I'd like to just touch on a couple of key points. Overall, the layout, we appreciate the overall layout and design of the redevelopment project, which creates a street grid and added street parking and provides an appropriate configuration for the bus facilities. The proposal will be an improvement to the pedestrian environment, improving access and safety for transit riders. Regarding bus bays, we appreciate the proposal adding the bus bays for future needs for ride-on service. We understand that Metrobus has more than enough room in its existing bus bays. WMATA often over-designs bus bays, appearing to give little consideration to how altered design could meet the needs for bus operations while creating a more pedestrian-friendly environment. We have investigated the concerns expressed by the City of Takoma Park regarding bus facilities and spoken to all of the local service providers regarding the proposal of the additional bus bays and layover spaces for future transit needs. And all the providers believe that it adequately will serve existing and future needs. Regarding metro parking, Durgan has consistently advocated that WMATA's investments provide access to transit riders in the most cost-effective way. Metro's own analysis shows that building a parking structure for Metro riders is not the most cost-effective way for providing rider access and transit services. However, if a parking garage is built, we need to ensure that the users pay for that parking because it's a very expensive cost, or at least share the burden of the cost, or other users such as the business. And I just want to make one more point. The affordable housing requirements proposed in the council resolution was a 20% set aside. We're not seeing that now, and we want at least the inclusionary zoning policy of 10%. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next witness is Penny Jones Napier, President, Board of Directors, Old Takoma Business Association.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman. As you've stated, my name is Penny Jones Napier. I'm the President of the Old Takoma Business Association. I'm also a resident of Takoma, the Takoma neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and I own 2 local businesses that are adjacent to the metro station. The Business Association is one of a handful of cross-jurisdictional associations that operate in both Washington, D.C., Tacoma area, and Takoma Park, Maryland. And our purpose is to bring together businesses and community organizations dedicated to developing a vibrant market center, from the Tacoma Junction, Maryland, to the Takoma Theater, D.C. on 4th Street, which is very close to the metro station. It's actually, the metro station is in the middle of the commercial area we represent, and we feel it's critical to the success and growth of businesses in the area. We're concerned about the current plans for the development of the Takoma station with limited bus bays, reduced parking, and restricted access for pedestrians, bicycle riders, the handicapped, and commuters. We're also concerned about the dead space in the commercial corridor, which makes the area unwelcome, and there's a feeling of safety issues, which we are currently addressing and have addressed in the past, both for the 4th Street Business District and for Takoma Park businesses, as well as the loss of green space in the area. We are supportive of smart growth and appropriate development for the proposed area, which should include affordable housing options, green space retention, which can be utilized by the community, pedestrian walkways, which are safe, well-lit, and accessible, alternative transportation access, including more bike lockers, and a flex car, zip car. We would also like to see access to the Tacoma DC 4th District and Cedar Corridor in some fashion from the metro stop, if possible. And the addition of public art, which could be easily added through grants to those areas to help make it a more welcoming gateway to the community. The Tacoma Metro Station has the highest number of pedestrian users of any station in the entire metropolitan area, with 1.6 million metro exits per year. Demographic studies of the 4th Street District within the last 5 years confirm this usage. Such high pedestrian usage requires that we pay attention to the pedestrian access points and the safety and desirability of the area. We also recognize the importance of western access for entrance and exit to the station. Contrary to the current WMATA plans, which do not meet many of these goals, given what has been presented so far, we feel the following points are essential for development in this area. We need pedestrian access that is safe, that minimizes mixing pedestrian traffic with car, bike, and bus traffic along the same axis. I'll present the rest of my remarks in writing, but we work hard through the Main Street Initiative to help build community and build access, and we feel that you have a great opportunity right now to go back and redress the concerns of the community and work out a solution that will meet all of the needs of the community and provide both a great transit area and development. Thank you very much, and I appreciate letting me present in front of you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next call, Davis S. Fry.
That's David with a D.
David.
Yes.
Typo, wow.
Good evening. My name is David Fry. I am a resident of Tacoma, D.C. I've lived here for 18 years, and I am also a member of the board of the Tacoma, D.C. Neighborhood Association and currently serve as secretary of the board, although I'm about to go off the board. But I'm only giving that for purposes of identification. I'm speaking here for myself and not for the organization. I support this project in concept and in most of the details. Contrary to what many people have said, this will reflect a dramatic improvement in the pedestrian environment over what we have now. There will be an increase in bus bays from 9 to 12, from my understanding, 10 plus 2 layover bays. If more bus routes are needed, I would submit that buses can be redirected to Fort Totten or to Silver Spring, which are far better equipped to handle an increase in buses than this station. There's so many good things. I'm not going to list all the good things about this project, but there are many. It gets land back on the tax rolls. It will improve safety for the neighborhood. It will bring much-needed pedestrian foot traffic to support local businesses. That being said, there is one issue that that I believe is very important, and that is that the alternative of the garage be included. One of the most important features of the Central District Plan was a one-to-one parking replacement. A lot of people depend upon that parking, particularly elderly and retired people who go downtown during the day. One thing that I would recommend as a possibility to expand parking would be to put a covenant in the agreement that the residents living in the new development would not be able to apply for residential parking, that be reserved as metered space, which will increase the availability of parking spaces and will actually result in a net increase of overall spaces on the site. Again, I support this project. I believe it's essential to the neighborhood and essential for the future of the city and the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Our next witness is Loretta Newman. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Loretta Newman. I've lived in Tacoma for D.C. for 32 years. My home is 3 blocks from the Metro. When I worked at Metro, I used it daily. I'm retired now, but I still use it very frequently. My background, I've been very active in the neighborhood, and I've listed the various organizations for you just to give my credentials, not to say that I'm speaking for them. I'm here, unlike many of the people who testified before, but like David Fry, who just spoke, not to oppose this development, but simply to comment on the impact of some of the transit issues that have been raised and think of ways, present ways, recommend ways to improve it. First, auto parking, and that's been talked about considerably. I did a personal little survey yesterday of the Metro site. I use it daily, not daily, but I use the daily parking often, because I go to meetings downtown that are late in the day, extend well into the evening, and I don't want to come home late at night and walk those 3 blocks down Blair Road to my house. So I know it well, how that parking area is used. But what I perceived and what I yesterday really even opened my eyes even more. There are 3 areas. There's one to the right of the entrance, which has about 58 spaces and allows parking from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. weekdays. The middll lot, which has 89 spaces, allows it from 8:30 in the morning till 3:30. Then there's a break. There's supposed to be no parking there. And then from 7 p.m. to 2 a.m. And then at the edge of that lot, there are 6 spaces assigned as available for 15-minute unattended car parking. That's your kiss and ride. The purpose of all this convoluted parking is to assure that we don't have commuters parking there. Well, what I've discovered is, indeed, the commuters are parking there right now, and that's one of the reasons it's very difficult during the day now to find a space. Especially the middle lot, but there's people parking in the middle of the afternoon. No tickets on them, even with expired meters, no tickets on them. The other lot, people with expired meters, all day, no tickets. And even in that attended lot for 15 minutes, the kiss and ride, I found cars parked there when I went early in the day and then came back late at night after my meeting yesterday downtown and discovered they were still there and they were not ticketed. I talked to a transit official who was in a car there, and I asked her about it. Do they ticket? She said, of course they ticket. I said, are you planning to ticket? There's so many here that are expired. She said, no, there's a foot patrolman and he'll do it. And I looked around and said, no, I've never seen a foot patrolman here. And I waited, and I came back 4 times and never saw one. So I'm going to lead to my recommendations about parking at the Metro. Any new development, I don't care what it is, at the Metro should provide approximately the same amount of public parking, and I'm sorry, but I'm finished. But they need to enforce it. If you don't enforce it, it's not going to do us any good. And I also think that we should have all the parking equally restricted to 5 or 6 hours maximum during the day, so that it's useful for us, but it's not used by the commuters. For the bus bays, I'm shocked at people who want to have more bus bays. They're more impervious. pavement, more runoff, polluted water ultimately in the Chesapeake Bay. We do not need to have significantly more buses lumbering through our narrow streets. I agree with David Fry. If additional transit use is needed for those areas, and they're not going to be in our neighborhood because all the new developments are within walking distance. But if they're further out, they can go to Silver Spring or they can go to Takoma. And I have several recommendations. I want to agree with a lot of what's said. I just think those things need to be incorporated in the design of the area, not simply used as an excuse to oppose the entire development.
Thank you for your testimony. Megan Scribner.
Hi, my name is Megan Scribner. All the names are close today. I live on Willow Avenue in Takoma Park. I've been there for about 10 years. In these many meetings, the community has made it clear to its commitment both to transit and the development that fits the site. That was evident at the March 4th WMATA Community Planning Session. I was impressed by how many voiced support for the standards of the Takoma Central District Plan and the Takoma Transportation Study. I was also struck by how many found the EYA plan incompatible with these. I was very disappointed that this wasn't captured by the report of the meeting. I asked WMATA to adhere to the standards of the Takoma Central District Plan and the Takoma Transportation Study Plan and to its own access planning guidelines as presented by Scott Pearson, WMATA Senior Transit Facilities Planner. According to your own guidelines, stations should separate pedestrian paths from vehicles whenever possible. Yet in the EYA plan, the drop-off and pickup spot for the elevator, and thus for those who need the most help, is in the bus turnaround area. Not only will this cause congestion, it is an accident waiting to happen. Another guideline, kiss and ride function should be located to facilitate its use. Yet in the EYA plan, one of the kiss and rides is separated from the station by 2 lanes of bus traffic. Another guideline, development should not negatively impact existing transit service, and it should accommodate future access needs, including increased traffic. Because of the amount of land taken up by more than 85 townhouses, bus riders will have to cross 2 lanes of bus traffic in a much more congested area to get to the station, and there is no room for expansion for future needs. In the 2003 DDOT transit study, all the nearby intersections failed the afternoon rush hour test, and that does not take into account the 330 new units already built or under construction since then. This area can't handle the additional drivers from the EY development. Even if a majority take the metro, 85-plus homes with 2-car garages leads to many more drivers on the road. It's important that WMATA make sure that the EYA pay attention to both the Central District Plan and your own access guidelines. As to parking, neither the 75 nor 129 parking option matches our current need for at least 149 spaces. Searching for additional spaces will add to congestion and frustration, and the parking garage greatly cuts into the promised 50-foot buffer. The EY plan does not put transit first. Rather, it focuses on private suburban townhouses with 2-car garages at the expense of public access and parking. The design process should first allot space for current and future transit needs and the promised buffer, and then plan a development to fit on the remaining space. Please reject this proposal and instead let us for a development that is truly transit-oriented and community-friendly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodman. Sarah Rosnow. Is he present?
My name is Gareth Rosenhall. I live at near Carroll and Flower Avenues in Takoma Park, Maryland. I have a car, but I don't have a garage, and I ride the bus every day, the ride on 12, 13, or 18 to the metro station. My primary concern with the proposal is that even if we don't build anything right now, we have a serious traffic problem in the area with both the light timing and the bus congestion. My commute since 1990, when I moved to Takoma Park, is probably about 5 minutes longer than it used to be. My projection is that with this development, given the conflicts of the buses trying to get out onto Carroll Street, or what a lot of buses now do is they go out on Eastern Avenue and come around, and then they get into a big jam up on Cedar, where that intersects with Carroll. And of course, the light timing is about the same as it was in 1952, so nothing's ever been changed. We do need to do that regardless. But I am projecting that my commute is probably going to increase by somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes because of the congestion caused by this development. I think what we have to do is we have to take the number of passengers similarly situated, multiply by over the years. If we're going to be adding really, literally millions of hours of additional commute time, it's not uncommon now for me to spend 15 minutes or more, sometimes 20, to get to Carroll and Flower Avenues going through the dysfunctional Takoma Junction. And I can walk it in 25 minutes. This is not acceptable. I think there are things that we can do right now with light timing, and I also think that we could probably install a light where the buses exit that might have priority, where the bus activates the light so that the buses can get out into the stream of traffic. If we're really serious about bus transportation, we ought to be looking at those kinds of options. I'm not opposed to development. I think that we can build something here, but I think we need to take a look, as other speakers have indicated, at the transit needs first. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. I would like to indicate that I've just been joined by Mr. Charles Deacon, who is a member of the WMATA board from Prince George's County. I also would like to recognize that we have Mr. Gary Enrich, I think is his name, in the audience. He's representing the Director of Transportation in Montgomery County and County Executive Douglas Duncan. All right, our next speaker is Jeffrey P. Silverstone.
Good evening. I represent Seeger's Church, DC Church, located across Carroll Street from the Takoma station. We walk, bike, and take the subway to church. We consider the station site to be a gateway between DC and Maryland and the center of an integrated Takoma community. The Takoma Central District Plan is the product of a community-driven planning process which was unanimously ratified by the DC Council. It incorporates, by reference, the Takoma Transportation Study conducted by both DC and Takoma Park, Maryland. It is imperative that redevelopment comply with these recommendations. This means that, 1, the site provide adequate parking to allow Takoma non-commuters who are unable to walk to the station to use the rail system for shopping and other short-term excursions. Resident permit-only street parking does not meet this demand. 2, the housing invite rail commuters by limiting private parking to 1 space per unit. WMATA won't benefit if 2-car commuters move there, as EYA promotes. 3, 50 new bike racks accommodate increased demand due to the implementation of the Metropolitan Branch Trail. We suggest that a video camera cover these racks to discourage theft and vandalism. Since there is now a waiting list for all 60 existing bike lockers, which are cut to 40 by EYA, bike racks with video surveillance are important for multimodal transportation. EYA has no racks on any chart that I've seen. 4, we create an accessible entrance from the west to the station by extending the tunnel used for ADA access on the eastern side. This improves the site as a gateway instead of a barrier between DC and Maryland, especially for DC bike ride commuters and the DC wheelchair bound. Since the western branch of the Metropolitan Trail will run down Spring Place, we must link the bike network with the bicycle entrance. Moreover, Centrex is building 144 condos having only 185 parking spaces on Spring Place, with more planned to turn junkyards into a subway ridership community. 5, Appendix H of the Transportation Study, which was omitted from this meeting's information package, anticipates 11 actively used bus bays plus 1 spare. EYA only grants 10. 6, the station must protect a covenant with its neighbors made when it was first planned that a buffer would separate their homes from diesel traffic. In summary, these EYA alternatives must be redrafted or rebid to comply with the Central District Plan and Transportation Study. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Daniel R. Smith. Okay, next is Diana Vajutis. Thank you.
My name is Diana Vajutis. My points are, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, leave well enough alone, and first and foremost, do no harm. I live at 7416 Piney Branch Road, about a 10-minute walk from the Takoma Park Metro Station. I bought my house in 1986, exactly 20 years ago, specifically because it was near the Metro and so that my future children would be able to walk to excellent public schools in Montgomery County. Well, those future children are now completing high school. 20 years goes by in the blink of an eye. Thank goodness that 20 plus 20 plus 10 years ago, somebody in Takoma Park had the foresight to see how our neighborhood would suffer if certain traffic solutions were implemented. You see, I live at another transportation hub, one for vehicles, Piney Branch and East West Highway. The only reason our streets are still residential is because in the 1960s, wiser minds prevailed when transportation authorities were proposing innovative solutions to traffic problems, like turning Piney Branch Road into a 4-lane highway going into D.C. in the mornings and out of D.C. at rush hour. Another idea was to make Philadelphia Avenue in Takoma Park as wide as East West Highway is in Bethesda. Thank goodness community activists rose up and said no. Guess what? 50 years later, voluminous traffic still moves along these streets, but so do people. We have another chance to make an equally important decision today with the property at Takoma Park Metro Station. We're talking about less than 7 acres of land, the size of approximately 5 football fields. Right now, there sits a major metro stop, parking spaces, bus bays, bicycle lockers, and a bus turnaround. There also sit some 200 trees on this property. They provide a park-like setting for this transportation hub and mitigate some of the bus exhaust. The rest of the pollution dissipates into the open green space. For now, that is. At present, there's a beautiful, sloping, apparently offensively unexploited, yet ever so valuable green space enveloping the east side of the metro station. There's still room to breathe and to walk. If the proposed development goes through, we lose these 200 trees and almost all the open green space. The paved walking area will be severely narrowed, pedestrians will be funneled to a sidewalk they have to share with taxis, bicyclists, commuters, and the commuters arriving by bus and by kiss and ride. The public space will have been compressed to accommodate the very unwise positioning of a town of townhouses, because in addition to the numerous apartment buildings going up in Old Town Tacoma, we need more. And where is the snow going to be piled come winter? Thanks, but no thanks to the gazebo, the amphitheater, and the playground. We already have a gazebo in town. We don't need another one. We already have a clock. Besides, who in their right mind would build a playground among bus fumes or a performance venue in proximity to honking horns, chugging buses, and train announcements? People come to the Takoma Metro stop to come home or to get someplace else. They visit Farmers Market, House of Musical Traditions, attend class at Takoma campus of Montgomery College, or transfer to buses taking them farther. They will need more space for more buses and more pickup, not less. I understand the developers stepping off the train at Takoma Metro look out over the expansive green... Oh, well, anyway, with the green space at Takoma Park, it's as useless as Central Park in Manhattan. Let's not let it be devoured.
Thank you for your testimony. Next is Seth Grimes.
Thank you to the WMATA board for convening this meeting, Ms. Mack for chairing it. Welcome to Takoma Park. I'd say you're seeing us at our best. The joint D.C. and Maryland community, we are engaged and outspoken, and I'm sure you appreciate that. My name is Seth Grimes. I'm resident of Takoma Park, Maryland, and I'm president of the Old Town Residents Association. The Old Town area is the Maryland neighborhood immediately adjacent to the metro station. It's bounded by Eastern Avenue and includes about 520 households with many, many residents who walk to the metro station, some who bicycle to the station, others who are dropped at the kiss and ride. Many of us park in the station's lot when using Metro Rail, and many of us use the station's bus facilities. One of my sons, for instance, takes the ride-on bus route number 12, which connects the Takoma and Silver Spring metro stations twice daily to get to and from school. The Old Town Residents Association passed a resolution earlier this year that development plans must prioritize the transit usability of the site by commuters and park day users of the station, by pedestrians, bicyclists, bus patrons, and drivers. Development plans must preserve the current number of on-site parking spaces, and any development of the site must be responsive to the transportation findings and recommendations of the Takoma Central District Plan and Takoma Transportation Study. The current development plans do none of these things. The current plans dramatically reduce the number of public parking spaces. They make handicapped transit access more difficult by displacing the drop-off away from the elevator entrance. They route buses, private vehicles, and bicycles through the same access route, which will create a dangerous situation for all concerned, and which is contrary to the Tacoma Central District Plan. They counter WMATA's bus service priorities. They don't allow for growth in bus ridership expected with new development in the service area. And I note that even plan supporters like Mr. Fry, who spoke earlier, would see a need with this plan to locate future bus services away from the Tacoma Metro station at other stations, an admission that the current plan is inadequate for transit needs, and so on. You've heard all of this before. The current plans, further, as you have heard, will provide WMATA with the equivalent of at best 2 days operating expenses, adding insult to injury. Members of the Old Town Residents Association recognized these points in passing a second later resolution stating that OTRA opposes current WMATA UIA development plans which lack regard for the Tacoma Central District Plan and Transportation Study. The resolution goes on to say that we would happily support any of 3 alternative design visions presented to us or a variant created by the greater community. Let us be clear, we do not oppose development. We do not oppose development at the Tacoma Metro Station. We support transit and community-friendly development. The current plan is not that. It is not in WMATA's interest, nor is it in the community's interest. WMATA needs to go back to the drawing board. Please work with us. And I'll point out about the community turnout. You see at this meeting that was at the March design meeting that has been at meetings for 6 years now. Please work with us to ensure that the Tacoma Metro Station development prioritizes transit and community needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. David V. Paris. Richard Holziger. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh.
My name is David Paris. I live on Larch Avenue in Takoma Park. I'm a lifelong resident of the area and have been involved in the planning of the Metro stop since before its inception. I think the stop is, I think the planning of the stop is terribly important, and that the park is terribly important. And I remember very distinctly the planning that went into its creation. I think part of the importance of the park is its relationship to the Metropolitan Branch Trail. It provides an opportunity to integrate the trail into the fabric of the stop to create a multimodal situation. And my concern with the plan that is before us is that it doesn't seem to address bicycle usage at all. I would say, from the point of view of Takoma Park and Takoma DC retail, that there's an important opportunity for this area to take advantage of the opportunity to draw riders from the trail into the commercial area of Takoma. It will provide a greater consumer base for Takoma businesses, a far more important retail contribution than any retail that might be built on that site. I share the opinion of many that the planning emphasis has been wrongly focused on justifying this project rather than looking to the transit needs of this community, and join with many others in feeling that there's need to take another look and go back to the planning drawing board. Alternative proposals have been presented, but WMATA really hasn't given adequate attention to them, and we're hoping that if this is turned down, that there will be an opportunity to look in a more positive direction, more of a smart growth direction which will protect this community. The present, it seems to me that the parking garage is a bad idea, which is going to cost too much to implement, and that the present parking, operates, and I'm wrapping up, as a land bank and an area which can be looked upon for future transit growth. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I call Richard Holziger.
Very well done, Richard Holziger. I live right across the street in D.C. on Piney Branch Road, about 3 blocks from the Metro. I've been there for over 30 years. I had some things to say about details of this project, but I think, having listened to everybody speaking, what strikes me is that there seems to be an almost universal agreement that smart growth is a good idea, transit-oriented development, enhancing the facilities. Jack Lester started out using those terms, and everybody here has pretty much agreed with it. What we don't agree on is whether this particular project succeeds in those goals. I'm enough of an optimist to think that there ought to be a way that you could come up with a plan that would convince all of us, or virtually all of us, this is smart growth. Now, I don't know, I'm not a planner, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know whether EYA is the one to do it, whether somebody else should do it. Some way or another, I think there ought to be enough of a change in these plans that we can all get here and say, wow, you did it. That is smart growth. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ruth Foster.
Good evening. I thank you for this opportunity. I'm not going to say very much. I'll write mostly of what I have to say. But one of the things that I want to disagree with is that we are not no bill, okay? Because we have supported a lot of the building that has gone on around the metro. What we are really concerned about is to make sure that the transit needs are taken care of first. And the EYA project does not do that. You know, I've been living in this community for 34 years, almost 35. You know, and my thing is this. Why would you build something that would restrict what your mandate tells you you're supposed to do? Now, EYA's project cannot possibly do what your mandate says. They project the bus transportation for 10 years. To me, I do not understand that. That is stupid. Because the only way you would only use a 10-year projection for something is that you don't expect to be in business 10 years later. You know? I was in on the planning of this station. And the Maryland and D.C. people worked together to plan the station. And I think we did a very good job because we thought that Metro was an asset to our community. Well, for some reason, the D.C. people thought that the Maryland people didn't have anything to do with what we did with the land in D.C. Well, the station was built for both jurisdictions. Monies was used for both jurisdictions. So that doesn't even make sense. When we planned the Metro, we thought a lot about how this was going to work. And the buffer and the green space, all of that was done with the idea of protecting the environment, the air pollution, the noise pollution, and for Metro not to be so intrusive into the neighborhood. So we thought we did that, but Metro reneged because in the final plans it didn't say park. So because it didn't say park, they said let's sell it. That's all I'm going to say right now.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Kathy Carroll.
My name is Kathy Carroll. Got my name right? Thank you.
good. It's easy.
Yeah. And I live at 6th and Aspen Street. That's a few blocks from here. My family, my husband's family, and my children are the fourth generation in our house. We've been there since 1913. And because of that, and having seen the changes in this neighborhood over the years, I think I agree with Ruth that we need to look a little bit beyond 10 years into the future. And, some people say, oh, those people who want to keep that green space, they're a bunch of tree huggers. And I would like to speak in defense of tree huggers. There are 3 government initiatives going on right now that impact tree huggers and also impact this green space. One of them is that there is a new comprehensive plan in front of the council right now that is the D.C. Council that is about increasing rather than reducing our urban forests. It recognizes that over the last 25 years we've lost 64% of our tree cover in D.C. and that it seeks to restore D.C. as a city of trees. The second is a study that is done with the mayor of D.C. and also with PG County and Montgomery County for forest management of the Anacostia watershed. This interstate group seeks to increase the trees in the Anacostia watershed. Takoma Metro is in this, the green space is in this watershed. And then there's the Chesapeake Bay Forest Protection Initiative, which is taking place with the mayor of D.C. and the governors of several states nearby, again, to restore the Chesapeake Bay. And so I'd like to ask WMATA, have you looked into ways at your stations to contribute to these initiatives, to save our trees rather than to cut them down? And so some people might say, oh, well, UIA is going to be planting some trees. But here's a piece of information from the Forest Service research. It's found out that trees greater than 30 inches in diameter remove 70 times more pollution per year than small trees that are just 3 inches or less in diameter. So the plan right now for EYA is to cut down every one of the mature trees. There's 26 of them, at least. And so this is serious. There's about 550 odd residences, not including the metro space that are planned for this area. And if we feel that we still need something else, what we could do is put, as Jim Graham said, we could build on top of the degraded parking lot. And in its place, we could keep this beautiful green space for the next 50, 100 or more years. And then we can all hug some trees. And our kids too, and our grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. You have to help me with that last name.
I'm Lex Ulibarri.
Okay.
I am here. First of all, I feel like I've stepped into a Hans Christian Andersen story. The emperor has no clothes. I have a lot of experience around the city helping communities develop alternative designs for areas of potentially inappropriate development. And I've been struck not only from a personal experience, because Takoma Park is a metro station I use very frequently, but by working with this community, their passion and dedication to smart growth and transit. It's a cross-jurisdictional community who has grave concerns about this site. As you're all aware, the history of this was that it was to be a flagship joint development opportunity for WMATA. The Central District Plan resulted in a message to the community that we had to accept this proposal because nobody else would want to develop here. As we all know, there's about 500 other units coming online within a 4-block radius of this metro station within the next couple of years. What WMATA has learned about how to develop on other sites with their new criteria is not being used retroactively on this site. EYA builds one type of residential product. The entire process thus far has been an irrational and dishonest justification for an inappropriate proposal. Alternatives do exist, which I'm about to share with you, but multiple attempts to inform the WMATA board and our elected leaders have fallen on deaf ears. the workshop sponsored by WMATA was dishonest to the community. It was conceived as a planning process, and it was instead spun as a new rationalization for EYA's same proposal. The report that resulted from that workshop was skewed. An inaccurate perception has been moved around about the community's support of this project, with a few vocal supporters who are inclined to support development over the needs of the community. EYA's proposal does not put transit first. It does not provide access to the metro facilities, which should be the most important criteria for this development. There's a maze of driveways which limit pedestrian access. You have to completely regrade the existing site. Staging for construction and access during construction are not outlined with the current proposal. Reconstruction of the metro facilities has to come out of your revenue, which has been clarified by other testimony. There's less parking, cross-circulation of buses, cars, handicap access, and pedestrians and residents. It's a nightmare just building on itself. 2-car garages are smart growth. Sorry, Cheryl. Bus bays, we need to have as many potential bus bays as we can. Gas is going to be $5 a gallon by the end of the winter, and we all know this. We have green buffers with mature trees and a park. Let's keep them. And there's a lack of transparency of the financial viability of this proposal. We need to preserve all of the transit facilities. And lastly, we do have a proposal out there that's been widely publicized for this site. It preserves all of the existing berms. It preserves the existing park. It proposes another level of parking on top of the existing parking garage, and units on top of that with a green roof, access to the park, which makes it an amenity for the development. That Metro is not painted into a corner, and the potential future growth is still open verbally. There is a win-win proposal out there if Metro would open their eyes.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Please do not propose to sell this property.
Our next witness is Mark Sherman. Mark W. Sherman. Mark W. Sherman. Next is Francis Phipps.
I'm Frances Phipps of Holly Avenue in Takoma Park, Maryland. I'm so pleased that our Maryland representative is here. I was here before Metro came. I worked with General Jackson Graham, with him, against him. You know how it is. Somebody mentioned the mandate of the WMATA board. And I'd just like to read what you as board members unanimously endorsed this February as your mission statement. You're probably very familiar with it, but I suspect the audience isn't. And the essence of the mission statement says that you are to provide oversight for funding, operations, and the expansion of transit facilities. That's it. The expansion of transit facilities, not the operations of transit facilities, not the improvement of transit facilities, the expansion of transit facilities. One assumes that a unanimously endorsed mission statement of an agency is carefully scrutinized, debated, wordsmithed. So I'm assuming the words expansion of transit facilities are what you are about. Now, quite frankly, you also are held to the federal criteria of any joint development must enhance transit facilities, it must enhance coordination among different modes of transportation facilities, and it must have a fair share of revenue. I just want to talk about two things. One is parking. Oddly enough, in this community where we don't agree on anything, almost everybody, even the Office of Planning, agrees that parking is essential on this site. For those of you who haven't heard the numbers a million times and have gotten confused, we've got 150 parking spaces right now. Best case scenario with the Costco garage in the UIA, they're proposing 129 parking spaces. This is not enhancement. All right, even the Office of Planning says they want to get as close to replacement facilities as possible. Finally, I am a planner. For all my sins, I am a planner. I am appalled. Transit-oriented development in every jurisdiction is generally encouraged by the waiver or reduction of parking requirements for new development. I'm just about there. Parking reduction for new development. We know in Montgomery County, they encourage the elimination of parking. We are talking about providing 172 private, non-transit oriented parking spaces on this site while we're reducing the public parking.
Your time is up, Ms. Ferris.
Was it ever? It's been for a long time. But this is weird.
But this time, you have to stop talking.
Yes, ma'am. This time I will submit.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte Stoneman. I'm working with his name.
My name is Charlotte Schoenemann. I'm a resident of Takoma Park, Maryland. I live on Tulip Avenue between Cedar and Holly, so very close to the metro. I'm also an Old Town Residents Association member. I'd like to say that I think... Closer?
Hold on for just 1 minute, ma'am. We have to change the mic.
Yeah, it seems like it's getting fuzzy. Hello? I'm a little bit daunted now, but
We're going to give you your time back.
thank you. I want to say first that I think developing the site is a really good idea. However, I think it should be tabled unless we can have it adhere to the Central District Plan and the transportation studies that have been done. I think that's really basic. I think the most important things for the site are transit and transportation, and I'm not convinced that UIA has really prioritized those things. I think that bus bays are important, safe bicycle parking is important, personal storage and bike storage are important. I can't say for sure how many bus bays we need, but I think however many we're going to have should be based on a really clear study that exceeds 10 years. I think we have a great opportunity to strengthen the urban core along Cedar Street. It's the commercial center of our town, and so it doesn't seem like UIA's plan really does that. I think if we're going to have housing on the site, and I'm not saying that we necessarily should, it seems like we have a plethora of housing, existing housing, new housing, proposed housing, planned housing around around the metro area. But I think if we do have housing, it should be transit friendly and it should be metro friendly. It shouldn't have a lot of parking for each unit, and it shouldn't have a lot of interior roads. It would be ideal, I think, if it were something maybe like the apartment building that's right across the street, the MOMI building, where there's sort of shared parking that you can rent a space, if you really need one. But to try to emphasize smart growth, try to emphasize people living in such a way that they're primarily using the metro as their means of transportation. I think it's a great opportunity to have a project that's like that. In achieving all those goals, I actually opt for higher density development, which I know everybody's going to be like, higher density development. So what I'm thinking is like actually put all the development closer to the street and maintain most of the green area. And so you save trees, you save the green space, you provide a buffer to the community, you strengthen the commercial core. You can have commercial, you can have residential, you can have whatever you want, closer to the main street. And yeah, I'm kind of a tree hugger too. So the more trees we can have, the better. Thanks very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Time just right. Peter Frieden. Is he in the room? He's not here. Eileen Sobek.
I'm an attorney by trade, and I'm usually not afraid to talk, but you guys have succeeded in intimidating me. My name is Eileen Sobek. I've lived in Takoma Park, Maryland for 15 years. I live near the corner of Carroll and Flower, so I live about a mile from the metro station, but within half a block of my bedroom window are 4 Metro bus stops, and right on bus stops, I have heard a lot of bus breaks and idling buses. There are about half a dozen ride-on and Metro bus routes that terminate, that stop outside near my house and that terminate at the Metro station. When I step outside my door at 7:30 in the morning, you can just see, I don't want to use the lemming thing, but you can just see the neighborhood, people streaming to the bus stops to catch the buses to go to Metro. So our neighborhood has a huge stake in what happens at Metro, and I think I'm just trying to reinforce we are transit-friendly, transit-dependent community. I would thank the Takoma Park City Council. I support the resolution. I think it reflects the vast majority of public sentiment in Takoma Park. The residents, I'm not going to go through the list that the Takoma Park resolution and many of those that testified before me in terms of what we think the shortcomings, what I think the shortcomings of this proposal on the table are. I would just underscore that transit needs have to come first, that to the extent development is compatible with dealing with transit needs, it needs to be truly smart growth. And thirdly, please don't underestimate the value of green space. In Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, with the mall at the center, we have to know that green space is a precious commodity. It is essentially priceless. As a taxpayer, I'm willing to pay almost any price to preserve it. I am the co-president of my local neighborhood association, the Long Branch Sligo Neighborhood Association. I am not testifying here in that capacity, but I will tell you that with respect to our neighborhood, the 2 issues that come up over and over, no matter what's on the table, are traffic congestion and what that does to the quality of our neighborhoods, and pedestrian safety. And those issues come up, whatever issue is being evaluated and is on the table. We've had some proposed development near the Carroll and Flower intersection, and over people in our communities say, what is going to be the impact of traffic, the number of cars? Our intersections are already failing, and they say we need to do whatever we can to get more people on buses. I am willing to put up with all kinds of Metro bus noise on the bus routes outside of my house. There's no doubt in my mind that there are going to be increased numbers of bus routes needed, and that you really can't underestimate the future transit needs that we already see coming and that should be accommodated at the current Metro site. My daughter goes to school in a school in D.C. that's located on a residential street. They are strongly encouraged to take Metro to reduce the burden on D.C. neighborhoods. Given the pedestrian issues raised by the proposed development, I would not allow my middle school daughter to take Metro. I would not put her safety at issue given the shortcomings that have been laid out here. Thank you for the opportunity. I will submit additional written comments, and please don't be a rubber stamp. Please exercise your discretion to take the thoughtful, constructive, non-NIMBY alternatives that have been presented to you, and do not be a rubber stamp. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ellen Zabian. Is she in the room? Ellen Zabian. Alice Giancola. Is she in the room? Alice Giancola. Christine Simpson.
Good evening. My name is Christine Simpson. I'm a Metro user. I live at 7300 Cedar Avenue in Takoma Park, Maryland, about 2 blocks from the Takoma Metro station. I've lived in Takoma Park most of my life. However, I have strong connections with the District of Columbia. I was actually baptized in this very church. My grandfather owned a grocery store located in Tacoma, D.C. As a child, we walked over from the Metro side to the Carnegie Library at 5th and Cedar Streets, and when my children were young, we repeated that pattern. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard. I'm concerned that the proposed sale of property and reconfiguration of transit facilities does not adequately serve the public needs of our community. I believe the proposal by Egan Jugenthal Associates, the sole bidder on the project, does not comport with many of the recommendations of the Tacoma Central District Plan and the Tacoma Transportation Study, two well-respected studies of the site, and I'm also concerned that WMATA may not be receiving adequate payment for the property.
Right.
In view of the time limits, I'm only going to make a few points, but I will submit written comments later.
Thank you.
The EYA plan calls for 85 townhouses, each with a 2-car garage. Having 2 cars at each townhouse does not encourage pedestrian activity and reduce vehicle trips, as recommended by the Takoma Center. Moreover, these 170 new cars will add to already congested roads near the Metro stop, as well documented by the Tacoma Transportation Study. This congestion will delay buses making their way to the Tacoma station, a development which does not serve the goals of an efficient transit system. A 1-car garage and a smaller overall number of townhouses would address this concern. I won't talk about bus bays or parking spaces or the buffer or the traffic circle and its hazards. I did want to mention the community planning session of March 4, 2006. I commend WMATA for holding that community planning session. I attended the all-day meeting, and so I was puzzled and disappointed to see no mention of it in the public notice of the compact hearing. I have seen the write-up of that session. I think it was written up by the facilitator. You can't really tell. I couldn't by reading it. But in my opinion, the write-up did not accurately reflect the prevailing view as I perceived it there, which was that the community strongly favored an alternative with fewer townhouses and with separate access for buses and automobiles, among other things. As far as I know, there has been no opportunity to submit comments about the accuracy of that write-up. So tonight I urge WMATA to follow one of the guiding principles of the Tacoma Transportation Study, which is listen to residents through an open community participation process. I do want to mention that I regret that WMATA is put in the position here of trying to support its operations by selling off its real estate, its public land acquired with public money. I support a dedicated funding stream to enhance public transit, including WMATA, and I urge the elected officials who are in the room tonight or their representatives to begin serious efforts to accomplish that. In sum, the Tacoma Metro Station represents a significant investment of taxpayer dollars. I urge you to take the long view and to base your decision for this development on the long-term best interest of public transportation with sensitivity to the needs and desires of our community. I believe the EYA proposal does not meet these criteria. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simpson. Wayne Goldstein.
I'm Wayne Goldstein, speaking just as president of Montgomery Preservation, Inc., MPI, Montgomery County's historic preservation advocacy organization. However, I'm also president of the Montgomery County Civic Federation, the county's oldest and largest civic umbrella organization, and a member of its planning and land use and transportation committees. Montgomery Preservation is concerned with the impact of this proposal on the Takoma Park Historic District. As the green space of the station has been identified and treated as parkland for decades and was originally purchased with federal dollars, we believe that Section 4F analysis is required. We would like to be a party to the Section 4F process, just as we were involved in the 4F process for the ICC. I have also participated in planning or projects to a greater or lesser extent at 8 other metro stations in Montgomery County, and I do not recall any plans to reduce parking at any of them. In fact, the need for additional parking requirements have been used as the reason to reduce green space at several of these stations. Here there will be a loss of both parking and green space. I attended the day-long charrette held in this room earlier this year, where I observed that 80 to 90% of the participants supported alternative plans. Similar percentages of both government and residents indicate such a preference tonight. I have had the great pleasure of working with EYA on the National Park Seminary project, where their proposal for very compatible infill townhouses were strongly supported by the community and was an essential element in making the restoration of the historic buildings an economic reality. However, this is a different project in a different place, and this time the community does not support this particular kind of building. So I ask, as have most other people who have spoken so far, that you reconsider what your plans have been. It's all right to admit error and to start again and do it right. You're not committed to a process that hasn't been working. You don't have to continue to do that. Thank you.
Next we have Priscilla Lapowitz. Is that anywhere near close?
I'm Priscilla Lapowitz, and I practice law at 6856 Eastern Avenue Northwest in Tacoma, D.C., and I've done that for 18 years, 2.5 blocks from the metro, and I've lived in Takoma Park for 25 years. Smart growth is high-density development near public transportation. In other words, to get people to live near the metro and use it instead of their cars. The current plan allowing 2 parking spaces per unit isn't smart, it's dumb. Who's smart? EYA. They're buying metro property for as long as they want to hold it for what I am told is the price of 2 days metro operations. EYA will enjoy the increase in the land's value. Metro won't, and the community won't. As for smart growth, if a couple buys 1 unit with 2 spaces, they'll be able to park 2 Humvees at our convenient location inside the Beltway and drive, if they choose, to McLean or Annapolis separately. Or the new owners can rent their parking spaces to real metro users, and then the townhouse owners will make the money, not metro. Sure, the townhouse owners will have 2 parking spaces each, but what about the people in D.C. and Maryland who don't live near the metro and have to drive or take the bus to the metro? Isn't their time and money worth anything? This is a bad financial deal for metro and for us who pay for it. The higher EYA's construction costs, the less they pay metro for the land, and we know construction costs will go up. What will metro, that is, what will we actually pocket? Even if the townhouses sell for $500,000 each, metro still only gets $105,000 per unit minus EYA's construction costs. When the units later sell for $1 million each, metro, that is we, will get nothing. And after the construction, metro will have to spend more of its money, that is ours, building a parking garage, rerouting the streets, finding space for buses, hiring consultants, and fending off community complaints, all just to restore the parking and bus space we already have. In front of my office building, DC has just added a lot of maximum 2- and 4-hour parking meters. This move has dramatically reduced parking for metro users who used to park on Eastern Avenue all day for free. DC government realizes there isn't enough parking for metro users. Why doesn't metro? Let's dump this plan, and as was done in Silver Spring, hold out for a better one. The gigantic Mall of America was a bad idea, and the new Silver Spring is a gigantic success. If metro really needs money, this is not a smart way to make it. If development is necessary, it would be a lot smarter for Metro to develop the land itself. We could hire EYA as a consultant. Or is this a done deal and we just don't know it?
Sabrina Barron. Sabrina is president of Historic.
That's correct. My name is Sabrina Barron. I'm president of Historic Takoma, Inc., which is a nonprofit preservation organization incorporated in the District of Columbia and the state of Maryland. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. HTI's primary goal is the preservation of existing historic context and the successful and appropriate integration of development in the historic districts of both Takoma Park, D.C., established by the D.C. Historic Preservation Review Board in 1980, added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1983, and the Historic District of Takoma Park, Maryland, directly across the street from the Metro Station, established in 1976, one of the largest contiguous historic districts in the state of Maryland, the largest historic district in Montgomery County. And I might add, this is a very unusual situation to have two historic districts butting up against one another, but of course that's part of our heritage of this community, originally being founded across jurisdictional lines, and of this community historically and currently operating across jurisdictional lines. Our goal also is to maintain adequate transit facilities and access to those facilities to support the vitality of historic neighborhoods. Historic Takoma has members who are property owners in the general vicinity in both the D.C. and Maryland neighborhoods, and members whose property abuts and faces the Metro Station transit facilities, park, and buffers. I'm here tonight on behalf of the members of Historic Takoma to voice our opposition to the approval by the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority of the current proposal to reconfigure the transit facilities at the Takoma Metro Station in order to accommodate private residential development on the site. I'll outline briefly the points in which we believe the current plan is deficient, and I'm sorry, this is ground that has been well trodden this evening. First, the project is inconsistent with the requirements of the Takoma Central District Plan in numerous areas, and it's absolutely shocking to hear numbers of individuals testifying that this is not the case. The Department of Transportation guidelines call for a joint development project to either, quote, enhance the effectiveness of a mass transit project and be physically or functionally related to the mass transit project, or, quote, to establish new or enhanced coordination between mass transportation and other transportation, end quote. Contrary to these requirements, the proposed development would detract from the current station's effectiveness as a mass transit facility by impeding pedestrian, bus, handicap, and bicycle access, and by dramatically reducing parking available to Metro riders by 50%. To 75 spaces if the surface lot option is chosen, or to 128 spaces if the two-level parking structure is chosen. The Central District Plan, and by the way, the Central District Plan and the Takoma Transportation Study were only performed after a developer and a project had been selected for this site. The Central District Plan adopted by the D.C. City Council concluded that any land use changes on the site must put the needs of transit users first, and I quote, redevelopment planning must recognize that the primary function of the Metro Station site is to provide transit services. Secondary functions accommodating the needs of the local business community or potential new development must be designed in a manner to support current and future transit needs at the station. And I have more here that I'll submit in written testimony. But WMATA can and WMATA must do better by this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina. Ms. Barron, are you going to stay around for a while? You know, it's unusual that members from other jurisdictions attend these meetings. So, but since it's in such close proximity to the state of Maryland, and the fact that over 50 years ago I used to spend quite a bit of my time, and particularly my summers, around the corner here on Butternut Street, I thought it was important to be here tonight. But I need to talk to you about a little caged tree over around the Adventist Hospital. Do you know about that one? Good. That was my great Uncle Sam. So I want to find out about what's going on there. Sorry for the interruption. Lorraine Pearsall.
My name is Lorraine Pearsall. I'm Vice President of Historic Takoma, and I just wanted to focus on the uniqueness of the site within the WMATA system, and I believe that uniqueness merits special consideration with respect to planning. What I mean by that is that the site is very small, and it's small now even without contemplating the sale. And it's also very constrained. As Sabrina mentioned, it's located within our D.C. Historic District, and it's also adjacent to and impacts our Maryland Historic District. It is totally unique of all the sites that you have, all your WMATA sites. One could say this particular site, in fact, is swimming in its constraints. And so it seems to me when you are looking at transit needs for such a special, unique location, you really need to look far beyond the typical planning of 10 and 20 years. Because once that land is gone, once you give it away, it is gone for good. And then what would you do? Well, 35 years from now, when all the pressures are upon us at all our metro stations, what will you do? Will you take those townhouses by eminent domain and tear them down? What will you do? Will you try to take our historic homes? Well, they are protected, and they will remain protected. So it seems to me that you have a responsibility and an obligation to consider extremely long planning intervals at this site. And it also seems to me that smart growth does not mean that you give away all the land you have available for transit and then stand around 30 years later and try to figure out what on earth you're going to do. That is not transit-oriented development or smart growth. I urge you to please reject this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Sabrina Eden.
Hi, I'm going to try to keep this relatively short because I think we've all been here a very long time. My name is Sabrina Eaton. I live directly across from the metro station at 7019 Eastern Avenue. I use it every day. I look out at it every morning when I wake up. I think that initially when I heard about this plan, I was kind of psyched because looking out at a bus station and a parking lot, I mean, it's not the most aesthetic thing in the world. But as this plan evolved, it just seemed like it became public transit second, an excuse to shoehorn as much townhouses onto that property first. And, I think the design of the houses is actually kind of aesthetic, and I wouldn't mind looking out on it, but I also think that diminishing the parking to the extent that they're talking about is folly. I see how crowded that lot is every day. This just seems like a great transfer of resources from the public to the private sector with meager compensation. It's going to diminish the access to parking. There's not going to be enough bike parking. There won't be enough kiss and ride access. I mean, people idle their cars outside my house, waiting for rides. And you're talking about reducing the amount of kiss and ride stuff inside the station. The people who live in the apartments across the street from me are very worked up about that buffer that is going to be taken away. I just think that you guys could do a lot better with this, and I think that, I'm not opposed to development on the site. I think most of the people who live across the street, would kind of like to see something more aesthetic there, but this just isn't it, and I would urge you to disprove it and come up with something better. Thanks.
Thank you. James DeLuigi.
And you thought Elric was hard.
Yeah.
DeLuigi. I've lived here for 35 years. I'm an architect. My background includes transportation planning and transportation design as well as architecture. Alicia, God bless you. You've listened to a lot tonight. I'd like to zoom you back 35 years ago. 35 years ago, a highway called 95 wanted to come through Takoma Park. People organized. I was part of it. We stopped it. A couple of years after that, a public agency by the name of Montgomery Community College was tearing down the whole houses at Takoma Park. We managed to stop that, although we lost a few. They weren't protected at the time. Zoom you back 25 years ago. Another public agency called WSSC, similar to your agency, wanted to come through Sligo Creek Park, tear down a 100-foot width of trees, and put in a gigantic sewer line. Well, you're about where they were 5 years into the process. We were able to convince our authorities and them, after they'd already designed the entire system, that what they had designed on the basis of what they thought was correct for WSSC, just as what you think at the time is correct for WMATA, was not the correct thing to do for the community. As a result, the design was changed. A lot of trees were protected. A hiker-biker path was built by WSSC, who never heard of building a hiker-biker trail or building any bridges. That was done. Working together, it can be done. Now, let me take you to today. Our firm are accessibility consultants and experts. We service the nation's most prominent companies and cities like Houston, Vail, Colorado, on accessibility issues. What you are doing with the design of this station is in violation of federal rules. You cannot move that drop-off position for people with disabilities to the street further away without being in risk of a court injunction. I can tell you that honestly today. Another thing that you're doing, the design that was presented tonight, with stores along the street as public housing, if you create multifamily housing in that location, you will need to provide elevator access to those units above it under the Fair Housing Act. I'm not sure the designers understand what's going on here. Our business is to help companies avoid mistakes that designers consistently make in not understanding federal regulations for accessibility. So the best thing I can tell you, in addition to what's been told already, is that you better look carefully at what you're doing.
Thank you. John Hurley? John Hurley here? John Hurley, going once. Stephen Smith. Did he just leave for? No. Okay, George French.
George French from North Takoma, speaking for myself and Marcy Stickle. Once again, for the 10th time or so, we express our continued opposition to the WMATA EYA development proposal for the complete destruction of the current Takoma Metro Station configuration, including the green space park. WMATA wants to force this proposal on the Takoma Station users like ourselves when it is clear to us from all meetings that the vast majority of citizens oppose this plan for myriad reasons. We have attended every meeting, workshop, hearing, and presentation on this near conspiracy since we first heard about the secret EYA-WMATA compact years ago. It is clear to us throughout the continual and active tweaking of this plan that it is, to put it mildly, not a good fit for our station. Their basic concept is still to reconfigure the whole site and flood it with mostly two-car townhouses, jamming the site with densely packed residential development and impermeable streets, roofs, and hardscape. As many others have already stated, this is what we also find troubling about the proposal. It is development-oriented with transit needs secondary. It limits future bus bay expansion. There is the new mixing bowl circle, which is an unnecessary departure from the current safe bus and auto traffic and pedestrian separation. Parking is reduced to half the current spaces unless WMATA constructs at its own expense a parking garage and allows some search and find, if you're lucky, on-street parking. The site becomes less secure. Townhouses and alleys bring the city to the site with possible unintended consequences. Currently, the site is transparent. When you arrive at or depart from the site, you can see clearly through the entire area for safe access. Handicapped access and kiss-and-ride drop-off and pickup near the elevator entrance becomes much more difficult. Traffic in failing grade intersections throughout the area will increase. 2 new public roads will enter onto Eastern Avenue and Cedar Street with attendant intersection problems and gridlock. Intense residential development is continuing to be constructed throughout this area. There is less need for another development, but an increased need for park open space. Indeed, Metro Park is the only significant green space in this area for current, new, and future residents to enjoy. In the relentless heat of the summer, nearly everyone waiting for buses gravitates underneath the cooling canopy of the park trees. All but 13, and no one can say with certainty they will survive, all but 13 of the 200-plus mature trees on this site will be destroyed. The site will have to start from scratch with new and tiny tree plantings that give very little shade. These trees in the park and throughout the site are sequestering carbon from CO2 in the air, a greenhouse gas, respiring oxygen, filtering air pollution, filtering and soaking up storm water that would otherwise add to the disastrous erosion events in Takoma Park's Sligo Creek. Also, the tree buffer to the apartment and community would be lost. This site will be unnecessarily torn up for 2 years or more with the attendant dust, noise, debris, construction equipment and materials, contractor vehicles, and of course barriers and detours to access. This will discourage us from using the station.
Thank you, Mr. French and Tom. Ruben Snyder.
My name is Ruben Snipper, and I appreciate the board holding this public hearing. You've certainly had an earful tonight. I have a handful of points I'd like to make. I try not to repeat what others have said, although I do want to emphasize some things. First, I believe the primary responsibility of WMATA is the needs of commuters, whether they're pedestrians, bike riders, bus riders, or people who drive to the metro in their cars. And I believe that the developer needs must come after the needs of commuters. Finally, I believe WMATA must comply with the Central District Plan and follow the needs outlined in the Transit Plan. These were agreed to by the community. Next, I believe that the plan as we've been seeing it tonight, and of course it's been modified yet again, is that bus and car traffic will be impeded. They're required to share the same roads. Rather, these must be separated. Handicapped access will be more difficult under this plan, not less difficult. We need more parking, not the same or less. This is a terrible use of public resources. This is a wonderful resource, and if WMATA feels it must be developed, and I have questions about that, but if WMATA feels it must be developed, then it makes no sense to sell it to a developer for very little or zero net money. The value of this property is much greater than what has been discussed tonight. Converting what is already a small space into 3/4 of it going to a developer and 1/4 to transit seems unconscionable. And finally, related to this is the use of two-car garages. I can barely say this without laughing. You are building properties across the street from a metro, and yet they're going to have two-car garages. There are many townhouses in D.C. That have single-car garages, and they are fully occupied. They don't have trouble selling them. I can't imagine a developer who built properties next to a metro station would have trouble selling single-car garages. The last thing I want to say is that the design limits the future expansion of the station, and this is extremely important. I have been riding the bus in Takoma Park for over 20 years, and we need more buses, more bus bays than we have now. The buses are full. Every morning I get on, it's standing room only. The ridership on Metro, as you well know, has been going up dramatically. Takoma Park is one of the most heavily used stations in the whole system. Makes no sense not to plan for expansion. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Banwell. Peter. Rick Dory. Oh, Peter, I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Peter Banwell. I live on Cedar Avenue in Takoma Park, Maryland. Appreciate the time that you're giving us all to address you this evening. My central point is that I'm not opposed to development of the metro site, but I am opposed to this proposal that you put forward tonight. There are two reasons. One is that the priorities seem to be backwards. It seems to be townhomes first and then transit second. The examples that other people have given in great detail, the future bus days are limited, and the parking is cut. I personally use the parking from time to time. Parking's not available, I'm going to drive to D.C., which seems contrary to the WMATA mission. Secondly, the process itself seems to be steeped in mystery. Where are the alternatives to this proposal by EYA? It seems to be EYA or nothing. Every once in a while, there does seem to be some accommodation given back to Metro as some sort of concession, when in fact Metro should have its priorities laid out first, and EYA or another developer should get what's left over. So in conclusion, I think the plan itself is sunk. It's bad for WMATA economically. It's bad for transit, and you can do better. Set priorities, and then invite competition on site. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Dory. Rick here. Alan Greenberg.
Good evening. My name is Alan Greenberg, and I'm testifying tonight on behalf of MetroRiders.org in support of the Takoma Metro Rail Station proposed bus facility relocation and parking changes. MetroRiders.org supports transit-oriented development. TOD makes neighborhoods around transit safer, allowing Metro Rail users to walk or bicycle to and from stations and to wait for connecting bus service at stations with safety. It provides important services and amenities to the neighborhood and critically needed housing and tax revenues to the region. TOD facilitates the regional accommodation growth in an affordable, efficient, environmentally sustainable manner and enables existing transit infrastructure to better serve the region. With TOD development, fewer expensive and unattractive parking spaces are required, whether built new or to replace parking loss as part of a stationary redevelopment project. And Metro Rail boardings are spread throughout the day, thereby alleviating peak-to-peak crunch on the Metro Rail system. Transit accessibility is key to providing residents of this area, of this region rather, services and mobility they need. MetroRiders.org supports the broadest array of strategies to provide such accessibility, including purchasing more rail cars and buses where there's overcrowding, extending transit services to new and underserved markets, focusing more TOD to existing transit modes, providing new and improved feeder bus service, and improving station, pedestrian, and bicycle access. And not least of which, also accommodating park and ride users. Now, all the above strategies are critical, but resources are limited. So the common conflict is what do you do about promoting TOD and also providing parking access? And Metro's approach to looking at this, I think, is eminently sensible. And they're using that approach here and at Rhode Island Avenue. Specifically, what Metro is analyzing is a redevelopment's proposal for its financial impact on the system, accounting for, among other things, lost ridership and parking revenues due to parking reduction and increased revenues and ridership from joint development. Then Metro only considers stationary redevelopment proposals and parking reductions related to such proposals if both a net ridership increase and financial gain result, enabling Metro to better provide service to more customers at a lower cost. Now, regarding reducing the parking from 149 surface space to either 75 lot space or 128 garage spaces, MetroRiders.org would favor the latter option, that is the garage, if parking revenues fully cover the cost to construct, maintain, and operate the garage. If not, and a parking subsidy is required, a per rider station access subsidy for parking riders should be compared to the required subsidy for other access improvements. And then a decision should be made based on that comparison. Certainly one would think that the replacement of all bike parking, which is not called for in the plan, I understand, would need a test like that pretty well. Looks like my time has expired. I do discuss in the written testimony, I'll provide you a copy, the ways to better manage parking through pricing, and I encourage you to enter the whole thing in there, and appreciate it, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alan. Next is Ellen Cassidy.
I'm Ellen Cassidy. I live at 7310 Cedar Avenue in Takoma Park, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I think we can do better. I have 3 points. 1, metro use. I'm concerned that the plan will depress metro use by taking away parking spaces. I live 3 blocks away from the Takoma station and often find myself not using metro because I can't get a parking space at the station and don't feel comfortable walking home down my dark street at night. So I drive downtown. We need more parking at Metro, not less. 2, fair return. I'm concerned that the plan will eliminate most of the green space without making much money for WMATA. 3, congestion. Already the bus lane at the station is ridiculously dangerous for pedestrians. I'm concerned that the proposed plan will create an even more dangerous mix of bus, car, and pedestrian traffic. I'm also concerned about increased traffic on my residential street. In conclusion, once again, I think we can do better. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next witness is Peter Kovar.
Thank you. I'm Peter Kovar. I live at 7112 Holly Avenue. The temptation is to say everything's been said, but not everybody has said it yet. I'll try not to repeat what everybody's already said. I'm 5 houses from Eastern, right over by where the entrance off of Eastern to the metro site is. And so, although less than some, I think my family's pretty well affected by it. And we have this odd situation where, because of the border, people who live in Maryland have relatively little say on this. It's mostly D.C., people from WMATA, elsewhere. And as you can see, we have the whole city council from Takoma Park over here in D.C. because of this. And it's really kind of an anomalous situation that an affected area wouldn't really have much say in something like this, and a governmental body would be able to affect our area, and we don't have much to say. We do have a representative on the board, but it's relatively limited. I think it's partly a function of the border. So I'm not against the development at the site, but I think the way this one has been done really is a problem. I drive to work past the metro every day. My wife takes the metro when she goes to work, and I think that the idea of not kind of bringing together D.C. and Maryland goes against what's been happening around here and what's reflected in this room. I helped out on this panel a few years ago that Adrian Fenty put together to try to deal with some cross-border crime issues, and we all met together, all the different jurisdictions, and tried to come up with some cooperative ways of doing it. But this, to me, doesn't really get us there. And I think there's a number of points you can make. I don't want to repeat them, as I said, about the transportation, but even now, I don't think the site does everything it's supposed to do. I get stuck behind buses every day on the way to work that are parked by the 7-Eleven. I don't know if they're parked there because the guys are getting coffee, because they're waiting because there's no room over at the other spot. And I heard several people say that commuters can't even use the parking lot. Now, I understand why, but that's kind of an odd thing to say. We don't want to set up the parking lot so that commuters can use it. And so I think when you add to that current situation where it's not ideal, some of the things that have been talked about, the interior parking spaces, strike me as just not a good way of doing it. I think I was delighted when the city attorney said that this can be voided. And there's really nothing wrong. I think someone else mentioned it with a governmental body saying, okay, fine, we're not going to do it. I think people around here, they look at something that the national government has done. They really like to get them to admit they were wrong about that. Let's just admit we were wrong locally and move on from there. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Christopher B. That was strange. You didn't want to give your last name or something.
Good evening. My name is Chris Turner. I grew up in Takoma, D.C., just half block away at Cedar and 6th Street. And I'm a homeowner now here near Piney Branch and Blair Road. So I live within 1/4 of a mile of the metro station, and I attended the Takoma Elementary School across the street. I went to the youth orchestra program at Coolidge. I went to Gonzaga for high school, AU for undergrad, and Howard for law school. I'm president of Neighbors Incorporated, a neighborhood association that was founded in 1958, which has members in Upper Ward 4 of Washington, D.C., and I'm also an attorney. Neighbors, Inc., through its Plan Takoma Committee, was one of the plaintiffs in the North Takoma Citizen Association v. UMTA and WMATA case, which resulted in a 1973 order between the parties. UMTA stands for the Urban Mass Transit Administration, which is now the Federal Transit Administration, which oversees WMATA. Originally, I thought I wouldn't testify tonight, but after listening to everyone, no one touched on the points that I'd like to make. And neighbors of mine and members of Neighbors, Inc. have asked me to testify and try to present our version of what we think has happened, or a piece of it. And I'm not here to be accusatorial towards WMATA or any of the staff, or to be prosecutorial. I want to be helpful. And I have a few points that I want to direct to the WMATA Legal Department. Those points are, this court order that I mentioned is not on the website, on the WMATA website. Number two, the 1975 Environmental Impact Statement prepared by UMTA, which is now the FTA, in cooperation with WMATA, which specifically addresses concerns at the Takoma Metro Station and in the Takoma neighborhood, is neither listed in the Notice of Public Hearing that we got this document. It's not listed there. It's not one of the 13 items listed as information available to the public, nor is it one of the 14 items posted on the website under the section on the Takoma station. It is posted in another section, but it makes no mention of its connection to Takoma. And it's important to understand that in this document that's 3 volumes, I think, and maybe 4 inches thick, there's a specific comment by the Save the Takoma Park Committee. And there are answers to that. And one of the issues was the parking. So that document is relevant to the discussion that's going on tonight, and I'll just try to quickly wrap up. The WMATA Legal Department is aware of the court order and the 1975 Environmental Impact Statement, but as far as I know, has not asked the Federal Transit Administration for a formal opinion on whether they should do a supplemental or new environmental impact statement. If it is ruled that the Federal Transit Administration thinks this document should be prepared, that might clarify a whole lot of the concerns that people have had.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Yeah, I have one more point. We have over 300 members. The failure to post these 2 documents under the information on the hearing tonight, the failure to ask the Federal Transit Administration for an opinion, okay, in my opinion, make this whole compact hearing tonight flawed. You need to give members of the public access to the information that impacts this hearing that's being held tonight. And I don't think
your time is up. Those issues can be brought to our staff, and we'll be happy to respond to them.
I want to be helpful to WMATA, but since the beginning, WMATA, in my opinion, the legal department is nice. They reach out to us, they talk to us, but...
Mr. Turner, your time is up. Thank you. Nancy Courier.
Hi, thank you for having this hearing. My name is Nancy Courier. I live on Holly Avenue. I've lived here for 34 years now. My husband and I live 2 blocks from the Takoma Metro. From the beginning, we disliked the idea of converting parking lot and green space into townhouses. because we value relatively uncongested streets and clean air. Now that we see how destructive of the commuting function EYA's proposal really is, we are even more dismayed. To be asked to accept both greater traffic congestion and greater air pollution in return for a development that only recoups the cost of 1 or 2 days operation of the metro system and actually hurts the commuting function that WMATA was created to serve is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Eleanor Allen. Eleanor Allen, is she in the room? Ann Ludlow?
Good evening. My name is Ann Ludlow. I live in Victory Tower at 751 Carroll Avenue in Takoma Park. I am Vice President of the Tower Senior Association Incorporated, which is the resident association. Victory Tower is an apartment building with 187 units for low-income seniors and those with disabilities. If you ask people what they like about Victory Tower, you'd probably hear location, location, location. The first location refers to easy access to the business district of Old Town. Second is a bus stop in front of the building. And third is the Takoma Metro Station, which is only 5 blocks away. Of the 187 residents, only 32 have cars. So public transportation is very important to us. It is the method of travel to medical appointments, prescription refills, grocery shopping, visiting family and friends, and fun. Unfortunately, quite a few of our residents have difficulty walking. Some require canes, walkers, wheelchairs in order to take care of these appointments and their business. Some move very slowly and cannot stand up for very long. So to enter a bus or to access the metro station, this changing buses, moving around is very difficult. To walk a short distance for us is a long and hard procedure for many. On one occasion, I drove 3 other women to the metro station on our way to visit the National Museum of Women and Arts in D.C. One had a walker, one used a cane, so I let them out at the entrance to the elevator, and they could go up to the train where there's some place for them to sit down and wait. I drove around and around and around and could not find a parking place, so I took my car back to Victory Tower and walked down to meet them. But tonight I urge you to provide more automobile parking, not less, more planning and consideration for the movement of the traffic, and I also strongly recommend better access to the Takoma station for those with disabilities. This should include a drop-off area from cars and buses with easy access to the elevator, as well as handicapped parking places close to the elevator. And we urge careful planning of the bus bays so that people do not have to walk through traffic when they change buses and get to the station. So I recommend that you study and correct these 2 problems, inadequate parking and inaccessibility. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next witness is Larry Silverman.
Good evening, Chairman Mack.
Good evening.
Mr. Deegan. My name is Larry Silverman. I live on Birch Avenue, just a few blocks from the metro. That's one of the reasons we bought our house there more than 20 years ago. I'm also an environmental attorney. I serve on the Montgomery County Water Quality Advisory Group, which is appointed by the county executive and approved by the council. I'm a founding member of the Anacostia Watershed Society Board of Directors and served with them for many years. So it won't surprise you to say I want to talk about the environment. I want more specifically to talk about the water issues, water management, water pollution issues that relate to this site. I don't think it's been talked about. I also incidentally teach environmental law and policy at Johns Hopkins University. graduate program. For a large urban transportation system, you face a tremendous number of environmental challenges, but in the water area, probably your biggest problem is stormwater management, because you have large impervious surfaces, you're dealing with oils and greases and emissions from diesel and other engines, so you have a really difficult time with land management. And it's something that an agency has to focus on, and not only is it a good idea to focus on it, but it's really becoming increasingly a legal obligation, particularly as stormwater management permits ratchet up and get more difficult. So it's something you're going to have to face. You've always had to face it. When I first started working with WMATA and its water pollution issues, or working opposite them usually, there was a reluctance to look at this problem. I think it's getting better, but this is an issue here too. So what I want to do is just suggest two standards by which you should judge the developments that occur or that you plan out, and think about those standards as you work on modifying this plan. Number one is you should diminish the water pollution impact of stormwater as a result of any development that happens. You should make it less, not more. And in fact, I would suggest to you that it would be prudent and a good thing, but also legally prudent, to think about a 25% reduction in the impacts from stormwater, and reduce impacts from stormwater by slowing the volume of it. No, that's number one. Number two, there's a set of standards for architecture called the LEED, Leadership in Environmental and I don't remember what it stands for, but it means energy design. Thank you. And they have a silver, gold, platinum. I would suggest follow a gold standard for any new development at this site. I think it's consistent with what's happening around the site by private developers, and I think you should follow it too. So reduce the stormwater impacts by a fixed percentage, follow at least a gold LEED standard. I think if you do that, many of the other problems we've been talking about will solve themselves, and they'll solve themselves on an objective basis that can be measured and proven. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Paul Rorick. Okay, he's not present. Brian Robinson.
Hi, my name is Brian Robinson, and I live on Maple Avenue in Takoma Park, Maryland. I'm also representing, I grew up here, so I remember the tree with the cage around it too. I'm also representing Friends of Old Takoma, Inc., which is headquartered across the street from the Metro on Carroll Street. We are a planning community development organization which covers the Old Takoma area conjointly with the Business Association, centered on the Metro site. Friends of Old Takoma, Inc. is deeply concerned with the loss of two transit serviceability requirements which are considered best practices in transit-oriented developments nationwide. These two requirements haven't really been discussed much in this hearing. We've heard extensive testimony on parking, disability, and bus impacts, and I share those concerns. The following two issues have been little discussed. They're crucial to any transit serviceability analysis. Number one is mixed use, and number two is stormwater catchment area, stormwater management. Mixed use. The project turns its back on the center of our community, generally considered to be the intersection of Cedar and Carroll Streets, 2 blocks from the surviving commercial areas in Maryland and D.C. When Metro came in, they tore down numerous commercial buildings at the heart of the commercial district, immediately in front of the train station and facing what is now the Village Green, which used to be sort of truck stop. Rather than create a usable Village Green by restoring the original configuration of buildings and open space, while providing increased density as appropriate, the current plan concentrates all development at the bottom of the valley. That leads to the second point, which is stormwater management. By placing all development at the furthest end of the valley, farthest from the urban core, and the metro entrance, the current plan creates impacts that are substantially similar to an ex-urban development. The train station was originally situated here for a reason before Takoma Park was built, and that is the presence of Big Spring, which sits under what is now a grassy plot on Spring Place Northwest. And it drains into Maryland under the metro site. The stormwater catchment area includes the entire metro site. It's a bowl-shaped site, and it drains into a large underground stream which runs under Cedar and Maple Avenues, and Takoma Park has partially daylighted that stream. The current plan permanently paving over the stormwater area at the bottom of the valley on Eastern Avenue, instead of daylighting it and creating a usable open space, would make a positive environmental benefit negligible. It would have a negligible environmental benefit compared to development in Germantown. Taking the same number of units and just plopping them on wetland in Germantown.
Mr. Robinson, we forgot to turn on the timer, but I think your time is up.
I'm almost finished. Another speaker who also criticized this development noted that at present, people come to the Takoma Park Metro stop to come home or to get someplace else. If you want a successful green space, if you want a prosperous business district that is transit-oriented, not strictly oriented to car commuters, if you want a series of metro stations that are set up to accommodate as much as 50 to 100% future growth from existing residents, and if you want to create a community that's centered around the metro instead of a single-use pod complex with two-car garages, then you must change that perception of it being just a place to get someplace else. We can go back to the drawing board and explore community proposals for a marketable mixed-use development on the site that includes structured parking, partially paid for by the developer, enhanced bus facilities, an increased amount of green space, restoring the stormwater catchment area of Big Spring, and creates a hub for the community so people get off the metro and have a continuous metro-oriented shopping district instead of an environmentally unfriendly commuter gateway that is poorly configured, turns its back on Carroll Street, and permanently paves over a stormwater area and is dead at night. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Ethan Landis.
Thank you. My name is Ethan Landis, and I'm a principal and owner of Landis Construction Corporation and the Landis Building across the street on Blair Road. We are very excited to be new members of this vibrant neighborhood. We've incorporated green building technology and techniques and finishes into our building. So has the co-housing project and Elevation 314. Eco Park and the Centex project are planning and committed to green construction. Our area is a leader in valuing green design and sustainable growth. Please encourage that sustainable design and architecture and green finishes be incorporated into the WMATA site. This should embrace public transportation, biking, electric scooters and vehicles, flex cars, greywater and stormwater management, high-efficiency heating and cooling systems, etc. We are very excited about the opportunity for well-designed and built housing and sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Fanny misspelled Wingus. How'd I do? Okay. No.
Well, thank you very much for providing all of us residents and also myself the opportunity to be here and to give our voice. I'm a relatively new resident and also speak in my personal capacity. I live in DC, Takoma. I moved here from Europe and thought DC Takoma is the place to be. And I really haven't been disappointed. I think this is a very unique neighborhood. I've lived in France, I've lived in Germany, I've lived in Denmark and in the UK before moving to the US. And of course you're always a little apprehensive where do you end up next. And I really haven't found a friendlier and more wonderful neighborhood. Let me say that I oppose this development. I think that I'm struck and confused by proposal that does not incorporate any of these unique features that the neighborhood has. And this lack of imagination of this proposal has simply puzzled me, as a normal resident here. DC's development, the city of DC is beautiful. It has an amazing, base of urban planning, and I think there are all, conditions are there for this also to be, retrofitted in this proposal that you have, that WMATA has put, forward to the community. And this includes the question of the green heart that architects in Europe very much have endorsed. As you know, Holland as well as Bangladesh are the most densely populated countries in the world, and yet if you look at Holland and you think of Holland, you think of vast fields of tulips, vast spaces. And it's the heaviest and most densely populated country in the world. Can there not be some smart thinking, of all of us putting it together? And I think that the Friends of Takoma Transport, they have already got a sort of smart thinking point. Can we not pull a more smarter way, together that makes all the residents happy and ends up in a compromise where we have a park, where we have the parking, and where we have some housing, but which sort of has a green heart at its center. I would like to say I've worked for the World Bank. Someone pointed out that World Bank, rules have applied or not. I just wanted to point out that as far as the contracting goes along, I would venture to say that this wouldn't have passed procurement rules from the World Bank. Any country, be it Bangladesh, Nigeria, or Brazil, they would have not procured this contract in the same way. I would advise you maybe to use better rules in the future as a personal, in my personal capacity. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Nellie Moxley.
Hi, I represent Takoma Park. I'm actually part of Takoma Park, actually. I am Pine Crest area, which most people forget about. We're over on the other end, Eastern Avenue. I see, Miss Hill, you're still here after 6 years, and I see you're still hanging in there. I really don't think any of you should hang in at all. I think you should just take a walk and leave us be, and that's how I feel about it, and most of us do. You could find another site up there where that liquor store is at. It accommodates you real well, and it's large enough, and it's over on the other side where it is DC totally, and it's not part of Silver Spring that's been divided by the railroad. Anyway, getting on with this, there isn't much else to say except there's 9 people in my household. This here is really an intrusion. It's going to be a really bad intrusion when you start digging up something that really doesn't belong to you. I'd like to know how you think you're going to get 2-car garages built underground in streams. That's cute. I don't think so. I think all codes, I think all violations are there. I think that you better go back to the board. I think you better go back to D.C. and Maryland and look at this time frame of how the stream runs and how the buffer is set up. The first time you make a hole, you're going to be sitting in water. We have to really be careful now where the bus bays are sitting. So go back to the board. You've got nothing. We don't want it. The neighborhoods have already told you for 6 years. Please, leave us be. Don't try to make a new one. Go somewhere else. There's plenty of areas. We need this one spot. We're already sprawled all the way around. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Let's see, let me try. Lewicki. Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Tom Lewicki, and I've worked for the past 20 years in this area as an architect, planner, and urban designer. I worked for several years as the city architect in Alexandria, Virginia, where we considered very carefully a lot of similar design proposals in the areas adjacent to transit. I even worked closely with the firm of UIA over there. And there were some projects that the community felt was successful. I'll get to that in a minute. I currently serve as the Secretary of the United States Commission of Fine Arts, which is a federal agency with design review authority over all public projects within the District of Columbia. But I'm testifying here today as a resident of Takoma Park, and as a Metro system user. And I'd like to share just a few comments, try to keep this very brief. And really, this is really about urban design as much as anything. The Metro site, which is situated as kind of a link between the two downtowns in the district and in Takoma Park, Maryland, is really such an unused, I shouldn't say unused, but it's really one of the most significant resources for both the communities. And what we have here is just an incredible and unusual opportunity to do the right thing for both communities, right for the district, right for the city of Takoma Park, Maryland, and actually something that would improve Metro. What is currently proposed, I don't believe hits the mark. The project has a lot of shortcomings, particularly regarding the treatment of open space, the disposition of parking, the definition of the Takoma retail corridor on Cedar and Carroll Avenues. There's a lot of reasons. I think you've heard it. I'm not going to go through anything more. But tonight I'm just really going to address, just note specifically the problems with the impacts on transportation. Looking at what the proposal is, and our objective standard tonight is what does it do to improve transit here at this station. I don't think any objective observer would reach the conclusion that this proposal by UIA does actually does anything to enhance transit. It probably brings it down a little bit, and that's really a pretty poor acid test for this community. So, in conclusion, I'd just like to say that there are many reasons why the redevelopment or reworking of the Metro site, which is so critical to this community, may be desirable, but I don't think this plan does very much to address it in a way that resonates with the community. I think you've heard this very loud and clear. This is a real people are not excited about this. I urge you to really reconsider the plan. And there's a lot of time to think of something better to do with this very precious site. As some of you mentioned before, once we get rid of it, redevelop it, you don't have a second chance. This is too important of a site just to blow it on what has just kind of limped along for years and is probably an out-of-date plan that really needs to be reconsidered. So I really hope you'll take time to rethink this and do what's right for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony. Michael Syndram.
Good evening, Madam Chair, board members. Michael Syndram, disabled veteran who has served our country more than most. I live in the neighborhood. Over the past few decades, our traffic, commuters, people who live here has increased tremendously. And to echo the concern that once you give this land away, it can't be taken back. We already have spatial constraints. And when you squeeze more on less, you get more problems. I don't know if any of you live in or around the area, but we have very limited open space, trees. The land that we have currently is very, very precious. I think already the concerns are weighty. You're unjustly enriching a very few to the detriment of us all. And that's not equitable, it's not fair, it's unconstitutional, and it's incomprehensible. And I would ask all of you, Madam Chair and board members, seriously consider what's being done here. Help me, help you, help us. I do have a question for you, Madam Chair. I have a letter in hand that I've written to Dan Tangerlini. It's dated September 29th. I want to give it to you. It also cites an August 10th letter. It has to do with fair adjustment, a number of issues that remain pending and acted upon. And I would indicate that certainly if it's a small matter, it can't be resolved. You know, this matter definitely needs some more time and attention. So again, I'm going to give this to you, and if you would take
Sure, I'd be happy to take it and have it reviewed and get back to you.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Peter Frieden.
It's Peter Feiden.
Frieden.
I have some comments which I'm going to submit, and I'll just read through sections of them. My name is Peter Feiden. I'm at 7025 Eastern Avenue. Some people live close to this project. There's nobody here except my neighbor Sabrina, who lives as close as me. So I'm right across the street from it. I've lived here for 17 years. I've always favored development on the site for a variety of reasons. But unfortunately, I've come to a position where I can't support this development at all.
I want to preface my remarks with a very specific complaint. The developer EYA commissioned a very important study on transportation impacts by a firm called Wells & Associates. Despite my repeated calls to Metro and to EYA, the full report was never made available to the public. Specifically, the report on the Metro website continues to lack a number of key pages and appendices. Among these are existing traffic counts, existing levels of service, background future levels of service, and total future levels of service. These are fundamental data elements upon which EYA appears to be making its analysis in support of the development, yet the community lacks the core data to analyze and interpret the methodology and the conclusions of the developer's consultant. And as to my specific concerns about the scheme as proposed, these fall into a number of categories. First of all, is access to the site for those who drive to Metro and need to park their cars. It's noted the proposal reduces the amount of parking from 159 to either 75 or 128 dedicated spaces. Data on the use of parking clearly shows that during several hours of the day, virtually all parking is in use. The net result then would be to deny access to the Metro as a result of the project. There's no way getting around this fact. Further exacerbating the parking situation, it is worthwhile to consider, maybe some have already brought this up, the contribution of private parking lots to meeting the needs of drivers to Metro. Currently, there are two that I am aware of, one on Carroll, just beyond the 7-Eleven, and one behind the CVS. Development plans are currently in the works for the latter. The former site is considered a prime development site as well. In essence, the proposed EYA development would reduce dedicated parking at the same time that contributing private parking is under threat. Second concern is the effect on area traffic. The EYA and earlier studies clearly show that key intersections in the area are failing. Proposed development will add 86 housing units. The EYA study predicts the addition of only 16 additional morning trips and 23 evening rush hour trips. No reference is made in the study to back up these projections, and as noted, the raw data has not been made available for further analysis. On its face, the projections seem downright absurd. Many of these houses will be occupied by professional couples. In fact, this is anticipated by both the cost of the housing and the construction of two-car garages, a two-car garage for each house. A reasonable assumption is that 3/4 of the houses will be occupied by two working adults, or approximately 150 individuals. The consultant's projection therefore means that a mere 11% of these individuals will drive to work. This is just not believable on its face. A realistic projection might have been used on the community behavior of surrounding Takoma Park residents. Most of us moved here in part due to the access to mass transit, yet jobs change, jobs move, and often only one part of a two-worker household is ever in a position to take the Metro. Most of my neighbors include at least one resident who regularly drives to work. There's no reason to presume anything different at this project. Effect on the pedestrian system. One effect of squeezing in 86 houses has been to sacrifice a sound pedestrian access route from Eastern Avenue. Proposed access appears to be along a busy road that serves as a new through street, serves as access to the parking, and serves as egress for buses. The pedestrians would need to cross the parking access in a congested area and to navigate around a tightly configured bus turnaround area. Detrimental effects on Eastern Avenue. Eastern Avenue continues to be a dangerous road in the segment opposite the project site. The street carries over 6,000 vehicles a day, including many buses and emergency vehicles. Can I get about a half minute?
Well,
can I finish this
we're
paragraph?
going to have 30 seconds because you already had more time because we forgot to set the clock.
That's not my fault.
I know, that's why.
Okay. Yet incredibly, the right-of-way would be narrowed.
Now, though.
Okay. The right-of-way affords only a narrow sidewalk and lacks any separating grass buffer or parking lanes to separate pedestrians from high-speed traffic. This was recognized in the Takoma Central District Plan, which called for widening the street by 5 feet and adding a parking lane. Yet incredibly, the right-of-way would be narrowed in the EYA proposal in order to make the effective project site larger and enable more housing while making those of us already living on Eastern Avenue less safe.
I've got to ask you to stop.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our last witness that I have before me is, whose name I have before me, is Frederick Barron.
Good evening. My name is Frederick Barron. I don't claim to speak for anybody other than myself. WMATA is failing this community. This is one community, even though we straddle jurisdictional borders, it's always been that way. And I think you're learning about this community this evening. You're learning that we're proud to be a progressive community, that we care about people and their quality of life. We care about things like energy efficiency. We care about the environment, and that's one reason that green space is important to us. We're the kind of people that take a slogan like think globally and act locally and actually try to live it. That means that there are quite a few people here who support that if there is going to be growth, it should be smart growth. That means that there is support for transit-oriented development, and we have plenty of it on the way. Just about every scrap of privately owned land near the metro station is being developed, and all of those people in those new developments are going to need a place to go. They're going to be more metro users, but they also will need parkland. Most of the people that live in Takoma Park and Takoma, D.C. now live in single-family homes. The denser development will greatly increase the demand for that parkland and the use of that parkland. In the proposal that has been put forward now that was worked out with one developer and what seems to be a sweetheart deal is not transit-oriented development, it's profit-oriented development. It puts the profit of that developer ahead of transit. What that means is that in failing this community, WMATA is failing in its mission. The factors that the compact requires you to consider, reading from the literature handed out this evening, say land use, population, economic factors affecting development plans, existing proposed transportation and transit facilities, any dislocation of families or businesses, preservation of the beauty and dignity of the nation's capital, factors affecting environmental amenities and aesthetics, and financial resources. In accepting the proposal and going as far as you have, the WMATA board appears to be putting that very last point on financial resources first, and perhaps not even proceeding very smartly on that point, because it's not clear that you're getting, even in the short run, what you should be getting for that property, and certainly not serving the long-term interests of the community, both the immediate community in the Takoma area and the broader community of metro users. Thank you very much for your consideration. Thank you for finally coming to hear what this community has to say.
Thank you for your testimony. We do have one more person who has signed up. We did advertise that the hearing was going to be from 6 to 10. It is now 10. But we will hear Catherine Tunis, and I'm assuming that she is the last person who wishes to speak.
I apologize. I signed up on the wrong sheet.
Okay.
I wanted to tell you that I live in Takoma Park, and I use the metro every day, do to and from work, sometimes on the weekend, sometimes shopping. So this is something that feels like home, and I think a lot of people have touched on that, but the metro feels like it's ours. It's not just, somebody else's. It's part of us. And so we feel that it's very important how this is managed. I noticed that at the station it's already very tight, both for pedestrians and for buses. Often there's no place for the buses to idle in between their runs. They sometimes go out on the street. That's an issue. I did want to say that I came to the workshop in March, the all-day workshop in March, and I was very open at that time, listening to the different options that were being presented. I was very struck, though, that the facilitators there seemed to have an agenda. They wanted to keep people focused only on EYA, and if you didn't like it, they made you focus on, well, what little thing, what can we tweak about that to make it better? They didn't listen to wholesale, like, we don't like it at all, we don't like it there, we like this alternative. They didn't want to hear that, and they didn't want to write it down. We felt that was extremely biased, and I think that was a widespread view of many of my neighbors. So I wanted I'm glad that many people came tonight, and you do give a much better sense, I think, from listening to the people here, how people are opposed and how many people are opposed. I think as time goes on, we will need more bus service, more pedestrian access. I don't typically use the parking, but I do use it occasionally. And, you know, I'm middle-aged. I'm in kind of denial about it. But I know as I get older, I'm going to probably need to use the parking a little bit more frequently, going to doctor's appointments and things like that. I do know of other EYA developments around. I think they are not environmentally friendly. They use a cookie-cutter approach. They're not smart growth. They use very large, high-priced townhouses and paving over nearly every square foot. This is not a good development. Any development that is on the site ought to be smaller units, much more transit-oriented, at least a LEED gold, L-E-E-D gold, and concentrated on the current parking lot area. No more impervious surface. There were some other designs and other suggestions that were made at the, I see the light flashing, so I don't want to go into detail. Other suggestions for improving the transit system as it is now, the station as it is now. I did want to add, though, that the green space that's there really adds a civilizing influence to the commuters. I grew up in New Jersey. There's very little green space there. The commute is much more tense. One of the things that people love about Metro, it's very comfortable. People can sit there and read, but trees, that's my specialty, has a civilizing influence on people, and even that tiny little green spot that we have there has a civilizing influence. It's mitigating the urban greenhouse effect, and it does add watershed values, which is critical in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to speak? Okay. All right. We'll allow you to speak.
My name is Nancy Abbott Young, and I was on a committee 35 years ago regarding this issue. It amazes me that it's come back as it has. It's like a Rip Van Winkle type experience. We had a Citizens Advisory Committee when eminent domain was first used to take homes and create a public transportation system. It was the sense of that committee that there shouldn't be development at that site. And it was the sense of the community. There was a public hearing process, extensive, that took place. The Montgomery County Planning Board staff concurred with us and recommended minimal or no growth at that site. That was a promise made to this community 35 years ago. As far as I'm concerned, it still stands. So I know you've heard a lot tonight about argumentation in terms of public transportation, keeping the green space, improving the transportation services, which need improvement. But what about the public trust and the promise 35 years ago? I felt that way then, that development shouldn't occur, and I feel that way now. We had a green space there as a buffer between the hubbub of the system and the residential community. There's really no need for this development. It's not broken. The only thing that's broken, it seems to me, is WMATA's finances. My feeling is if you want to raise revenue, provide better public transportation services for the commuters of the Washington, D.C. area. Don't sacrifice our community. I feel strongly about this because, in fact, the freeway fight that took place in this community, as you know, and all across the Washington area, resulted in the freed up highway fund monies, creation of WMATA, the belief that a public transportation system could be founded in the Washington area that would serve as a model for the nation. Not every transit stop at the time that the system was created was determined to be a candidate for development. Our community stood firmly in that position then, and obviously we're still standing there now. again, I'm one of the only people still living that was on that committee, but, you know, time passes, developers come and go, the community will stay, the community will have to look at the architectural eyesores that are being put up around that stop. So I hope you hear us tonight. I have plenty of posters and testimony from that era that I'd like to present to you, and I hope you consider it. I'm sure that, you know, we won the freeway fight in the 60s. We won the argument against high impact in the early 70s. We had a respite because the forces that are destructive, institutional expansion, including WMATA designs on that site, were sleeping until they saw an opportunity. So this battle never ends, and we're prepared, another generation, to fight it again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and I want to thank all of you who have come out this evening to give us your comments. I think Ms. Tunis captured the sense that we hear all the time when we talk to the community, that people do believe that Metro belongs to them, and we think that's a good thing because it does belong to us. We pay for it through our tax dollars and through our transit fares, and we want to know what the community thinks. We do care about communities. I think this community is unique in that part of the community is in the district and part of it is in Maryland, and I think the final speaker just talked about what happened, I think, 35 years ago when plans were being made and promises were being made for this community. But I have to remind all of us, at that time, the district where the station is actually located, I understand that it is one community, but there is a line and it's invisible most of the time. But I suspect that at the time those decisions and promises were being made, the citizens of the District of Columbia didn't even have a vote and could not decide what to do. And we do have representative government, both in the district and in here. And so I just think that as we contemplate all the factors that are involved in this decision that will be made, the D.C. City Council does have the final decision in terms of what happens in the land use in the District of Columbia. So there are many factors here. There are many controversies. There are decisions that there are many authorities who get an opportunity to participate in the decision making. So we've heard you. We think that you have made some excellent points. Here we certainly will take away from this hearing the need for us to take a look at what's being planned to see if we can be accommodating to some of the things that we've heard. We will issue a report going out of this hearing, and you will have an opportunity to comment on it, and we will have time to study it before there's a final vote. So
I disagree with you that the district didn't have any part in the decision making. There were many people that lived on the district side of Takoma that were involved in planning that metro. So we had a lot to say about what was being done at that metro station. So I don't want it to be minimized, that the contribution that we made to the design of that metro station.
Thank you for that statement. Again, I thank all of you for coming, and as I said, you will hear from us as we assemble the report from tonight's hearing.